This is the Dreadful Podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're doing a rewatch of Penny Dreadful, Season 1. This is Episode 1, Night Watch. Welcome, fellow Penny faithful. This is TV Podcast Industries. We're doing a rewatch of Penny Dreadful. We're looking back at seasons 1 to 3 before the launch of Penny Dreadful City of Angels in April. In this episode, we're going to be talking about episode 1 of the show, Night Work. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, Penny faithful. I am one of your other hosts, John.
And we have a very special guest joining us for our discussions about Penny Dreadful. We have Ray from Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. Welcome, Ray.
Hi, how are you both? I'm very happy to be here. Very excited to talk about Penny Dreadful.
Cool. Yes, our time traveller across space and time is, whilst he has a glass of wine, we have a cup of coffee.
Very disappointed, but I don't really want to be drinking wine at 10 o'clock in the morning.
No, that's true, definitely.
We'd truly be in the Victorian era for doing that.
It would be absinthe. It would be sort of dripping stuff, water over sugar, and then strange things would happen.
We definitely wouldn't be able to record a podcast on absinthe, John.
No, absolutely not.
That did look delicious, actually.
It did, didn't it?
But we'll get to that.
We certainly will. Welcome aboard, Ray. We have known Ray for a couple of years as another podcaster doing a great podcast about Moon Knight, a Marvel Comics character. Ray, do you want to give a little overview of your podcast and what you do?
Yeah, basically I'm based, I keep on saying in plural, there's only one of me, but based in Australia, a big Moon Knight fan, and we basically do anything and everything Moon Knight. So talking about the classic run, comic books, to the modern run, the current issues coming out, toy action figures, video games, and the up and coming TV show, which we're all very excited about.
Yes, we are.
That cracked the internet for us last year. So, the announcement. So no, very, very excited. And, we have a nice community going around with, it's very, very fun to interact with like-minded comic book fans and Moon Knight fans. It's a strange thing. It's a very niche market, I guess.
Yeah.
Moon Knight. But it's always amazing to see the level of fandom that people bring to Moon Knight. And I'm talking about, rooms full of statues and books.
Yeah.
So it's very fun and very exciting. So we come out every week. We, depending on the phase of the moon, we base our shows on whether it's a full moon, a new moon, different segments, stuff like that.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because the character of Moon Knight is based kind of around Egyptology and kind of around some references to that type of stuff. So seeing stuff in Penny Dreadful and kind of connecting it with this character of Moon Knight, it kind of is a good reason why Ray's involved in this podcast with us as well. There's some things in here that you'll probably recognize from some of the mythology behind Moon Knight as well, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, absolutely. My eyes actually lit up. I mean, we'll get to it as well when that reveal kind of came to light. I'm very excited to I did a bit of research as well because I wanted to be up to speed with my Egyptian, mythology. Looking forward to, we'll get into that soon.
Excellent. And finally, before we get into the main body of the podcast itself, Ray, where can people find Into the Night and Moon Knight podcast?
Sure. Yeah. We're on all the usual social platforms. I don't include the likes of Snapchat and TikTok. I'm too old for that, so I don't know what the hell that is.
Anything that disappears in a couple of seconds, I just can't abide by as a social platform. I like longevity in my social platforms, yeah.
Absolutely. So Facebook, Twitter, facebook.com/ITK Moon Knight, or Twitter handle is at ITK Moon Knight. Of course, we've also got a webpage as well. So, that's a little bit longer, intothenightpodcast.wordpress.com. You can just search Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast, and we should come up.
Absolutely. And I'm sure if you search Moon Knight at this stage, you guys have been around long enough, you should be able to find the Moon Knight podcast, because it is the best. Probably only, but definitely the best
Absolutely.
Moon Knight podcast out there. For the rest of us, if you are joining us for Just Penny Dreadful, you can subscribe to us on tvpodcastindustries.com. We have many connections to all the places where we are. You can also leave a voicemail about your thoughts about any episode of Penny Dreadful or any of the shows that we cover. Go to our website, and over on the right-hand side, you can click a button and leave up to 90 seconds of your thoughts. If you want to go a little bit more in depth, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries, and we'll take your thoughts and leave them in our Penny for Your Thoughts feedback section.
Yes.
That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I like that. That's nice.
Yeah. John came up with that about 3.5 seconds before we started recording, so I like that.
Must do feedback. Sort of. Yeah.
In regards to the podcast about Penny Dreadful itself, the way we're going to be releasing these episodes is first on Patreon. We're going to be releasing each of our 4 episodes to our Patreon followers. So if you want to subscribe to us on Patreon, go over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, and you'll get each episode before it's released to our main feed on TV Podcast Industries. We're going to discuss episodes 1 to 4 in that big podcast. And the way we're going to discuss it is we're going to talk about our big moment of each episode as we go through it. It's not going to be as in-depth as some of our podcasts. We're not going to talk about each episode for 2 hours, as we do sometimes. We're going to try and stick to the major points that reveal what's going on in the full season.
This is going to be really tough for me, I must say, because even just trying to pick out a big moment, like, it's so complex, sort of diverse, intricate, the Penny Dreadful series. Just picking out that one moment is like, oh no. But there are 3 of us, so we will at least pick out 3 big moments, and we will have notes. So we will capture as much of the episode as possible. But I think, even on a full podcast, it would be pretty difficult. You could be there for like 12 hours, I would say.
A little bit of a misunderstanding here, guys. I blocked out about 12 hours. I thought we were going to go. I'm raring to go.
Excellent. Ray is recording into next Wednesday. I love it.
By the time we finish, we will be on the wine. Yeah, exactly.
I like it. That's a good plan.
Yeah.
Aim for wine time. Let's get into episode 1 of the show. Night Work is the name of the episode, a reference to the fact that Ethan is being brought into this group, getting his night work from Sir Malcolm. The episode is directed by J.A. Bayona, a very famous director nowadays, known for his horror movie The Orphanage, which is very well worth your time. His big Hollywood movie, I suppose, is Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom, the 2nd or 5th sequel to the Jurassic Park franchise, I think, probably 5th, most recent anyway. And he's already scheduled to direct the first 2 episodes of the Lord of the Rings TV series. So he's going to be over your neck of the woods, right? Close, anyway.
And rightly so. Beautiful country, New Zealand.
Yep.
Australia, beautiful as well, although I think our terrain isn't quite suitable for Lord of the Rings, more like Mad Max. So.
Yeah, definitely.
That's true.
Happy to stay in New Zealand. Yeah.
Absolutely. The executive producer on the show is Sam Mendes. Good to just reference him here. The showrunner for the show, John Logan, previously worked with Sam Mendes. He wrote some of the scripts for James Bond, for Spectre, for Skyfall. He also wrote Star Trek Nemesis, which is kind of connected to the show that we're covering on the podcast, Star Trek Picard. So interestingly, there is a connection there with John Logan, but I think the clout that Sam Mendes brought to the show allowed John Logan to do what he's doing with this show. He may not have got it made if it hadn't been for having such an acclaimed director like Sam Mendes involved.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can see a certain quality, can't you, running through the show, even just down to the cinematography, the production design, the costumes. It's really nice. But I think as well, John Logan just brings that contemporary sensibility to the Victorian period, which I really like. It doesn't feel of its time. It feels something fresh, new, dare I say it, contemporary. It's just that they're wearing corsets and top hats. Yeah. And I really like that. I really like how he's able to bring and contemporize this world, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, John Logan, he came totally out of nowhere. Like I had not, known his association with Sam Mendes or anything like that. Watching shows like Game of Thrones, the production values on those sorts of shows, were kind of the benchmark, for TV shows for me during that time. And so when this came out, and it's like, who's this John Logan guy? Yeah. Immediately, even from the beginning, the theme with the music, just the way the opening credits, I kind of knew, like, oh, this is kind of very much like the production values of Game of Thrones. Yeah. So, it was very reassuring. And exactly as you say, John, there is a contemporary sensibility to it, but, there still is a Victorian, old school feel to it.
Yeah.
I love one of my notes was the poetic script writing. The lovely lines for all the actors to deliver. So yeah, it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And John Logan writes the script for pretty much every episode of the show, at least that we've seen so far. I don't think he has anybody else on board throughout the whole series. It's pretty much his vision that's being brought to life. John, do you want to tell us what he gave us with your synopsis for the first episode of Penny Dreadful Night Work?
Sure. London, 1891. Vanessa Ives and her colleague, renowned explorer Sir Malcolm Murray, recruit marksman Ethan Chandler to undertake a job with them. They try to recover Sir Malcolm's daughter from a group of vampires. They're not successful, but do recover an evil-looking creature which is covered in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Sir Malcolm enlists the help of foppish Egyptologist Mr. Lyle to decipher the hieroglyphics and a young scientist, Victor Frankenstein, to find any other clues in the gruesome body. Meanwhile, the police are investigating the grisly murder of a young mother and daughter who have been torn apart.
Literally.
Yeah, quite literally. Although that is probably the worst way to go for the mother, that you die on the crapper, effectively.
Yeah.
Pull through the window.
What a way to open the series. Though,
yeah, exactly. And I did jump as well, so it was always good.
Yeah, any regular listeners to TV podcast industries know, despite the fact that John screams at the littlest things in horror, he absolutely loves horror, and this is just right in his wheelhouse where he's able to be terrified by TV.
Yeah, I recently screamed in Harley Quinn, the Birds of Prey movie.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember what it was about now. I just remember letting off a loud shout in the cinema and going to myself, was that loud? That probably the rows behind heard that.
It was.
And Toy Story 3 as well, that gruesome horror movie that it is, elicited a jump response from me as well at one stage. Teddy bears are evil, Penny Faithfulers. They are evil.
I guess it's an obvious thing to say as well, but they do horror really well on this show.
Yeah.
It comes in like little bits here and there. I mean, there's obviously that supernatural element, but when you get that scare factor, or, you know, it's kind of like a little bit of a trope when, someone turns around and they turn around again, or, and there's someone right in your face, or in this instance, there's a really inhuman kind of movement, like that woman just got pulled through the window.
Yeah.
It's really quite shocking. And, I think they do the graphic violence well, if I can say that.
Definitely. For the first episode of the show, because it is the first one and because we're being introduced to most of these characters for the first time, what we're going to do for our main point is talk about one major character. As Ethan is basically the point of view character for the audience, he doesn't really have a storyline for a lot of the episodes. I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but he is the main character of the show in some ways for an audience who's looking back at the Victorian era. He's an American coming into England, seeing their lives and how they do things. There's even a point, I think, when somebody says to, we do things the way we do things here, get out of here, American kind of thing. So he is that point of view character. So we're not really going to talk much about him specifically in the first episode, but I think he'll probably come up in his reactions to things that go on within the episodes. So we're going to talk about the three main characters here. John, do you want to take our first one? We're going to talk about Sir Malcolm Murray first.
Yes, Malcolm Murray, played by Timothy Dalton, who incidentally played the hedgehog in Toy Story 3 as well, the German hedgehog. So there's a quick little segue between those two things. To me, I think he's not very sympathetic, this character. He is that classic Victorian explorer gentleman who has a very strong will here. I mean, it's very much the explorer, you know, the British Empire associations, and around that Alan Quatermain figure, you know, I suppose recently with the League of Gentlemen that was done, that explorer version. So he, you know, he's a colossal figure. He has this massive house. You know, he's well connected within London society, but ultimately, I think for me in this episode, it really comes into his own where they are going to this vampire nest, which I really like the fact that they have to go through an opium den. I think that's another great thing about this show. it's that shadow world of Victorian real society. So it's the opium den, it's the drug taking. I think in episode 2 we have the pornography, and you have the illegal blood sports in episode 4. All these very highfalutin members of civic London society, yet they would go and regularly take opium. And to get to the shadow world of a vampire's nest and the superstition around that, they have to travel through the kind of shadow world of Victorian society for what is a really nice kind of fight down in sort of this basement area. They've recruited Ethan Chandler, and he's wondering what the hell these people are doing. He's been warned about what he may see, and you have kind of Vanessa Ives here, played by Eva Green, sort of along as well. But the two of them very kind of, if I can say it, comfortable in this world. They know what to expect. And I like seeing Ethan's expression as these three kind of, I suppose, valets of the vampire come to greet them. And you have a great fight, down here in the basement. And I love that Malcolm Murray has his own needle, shall I say, that comes from his cane to take down that lead vampire in the nest. There's a great moment actually, where the camera pans back, behind the shoulders of the vampire, sort of towering over Ethan, and you see the strength of it. It's really nicely done. And ultimately, Malcolm Murray, though, is the one that takes him down, but aided very ably by Vanessa Ives, who seems to have this inner steel herself. But he's kind of running this, I suppose I'm calling it a company, sort of. I suppose ultimately what we find is he's the one in charge in a sense, at least in terms of Dosh, and obviously for the aims of it, which is to find and look for his daughter, who has been kidnapped, I suppose, by the vampire. But this is not the right vampire. She's not in this nest. Again, another little sort of nice link back, I think, with Mina Murray, his daughter. It is sort of direct reference to Bram Stoker's Dracula, in that it's Mina Harker and it's Jonathan Harker's fiance. But her maiden name in the book is Murray. So it's taking it that kind of step before, which is really nice. And of course, Vanessa Ives is kind of his daughter's childhood friend, I think, as well. But I think we really see that there's probably a complication here. And again, I think, you get the feeling with Sir Malcolm, he's searching for his daughter, that there's some kind of bond. But I think you really do get the sense that, his relationship with his daughter is not quite that good, really, across the seasons. And it's complicated, and it's complicated between Mina and Vanessa as well. So I think Timothy Dalton plays Malcolm Murray really nicely. I mean, he's just so unsympathetic. He's very direct and to the point. You don't get the sense of him being a loving father to his daughter, or indeed to his son, that there is that standoffish element to him. And you kind of wonder how strong this company that forms is, because you do get an uncomfortable sort of relationship forming between him and Vanessa, who are the main people here kind of driving this. But great to have such a good actor in Timothy Dalton. I think he's really good in this. And I love his valet, Semembe, as well, even though he doesn't really say too much here. But again, I think that links to this sort of, I suppose, the uncomfortable notion of colonialism. How has Sembe come into his employ, and this idea of sort of, I think it's like black capitalism and exploitation. But I think Semembe is really nicely done. That quiet grace that he has as well, kind of speaks a lot. And interestingly, Malcolm does seem to put an awful lot of trust in him, certainly at this stage. So that relationship is kind of interesting to me as well, even though Semembe maybe doesn't feature as extensively as the other characters as well. So I suppose he's the central point of this company ultimately.
Yeah, I find Sir Malcolm quite a complicated character, because it could have so easily been him being a guy driven to look for his daughter, and that's it, and there's nothing that he needs to. What you mentioned, John, and what really does make him interesting is that he's doing this almost to, I kind of pitted him like a mix between Quatermain and Captain Ahab. You know, he's driven to hit this goal. But at the same time, we do find later on, and there are little tidbits along the way, that his relationship with his daughter isn't ideally,
exactly.
It isn't the best. So it's like, why is he so driven to do it? Is it this competition or this kind of drive that he has, which he's picked up in his travails in Africa and expeditions?
Exactly.
That has kind of informed his motivation to do it. And he's kind of lost his way a bit because, as you say, with his son, with his wife, I mean, he's not the ideal person. Yeah. But he is very good to have, I think, in this team. He's rock solid. As you say, he's uncompromising. I love this little quote that he puts on. I'll put it here. He says to Ethan Chandler, don't be amazed by anything you see and don't hesitate. That is just that was so cool because we are coming into this world with Ethan and we don't know what is happening. You know, we don't know what is going on. We've never seen this nest before. And, Ethan's going in cold. He meets Vanessa, and he meets Sir Malcolm. And the first thing they say is, look, can you handle a gun? Yep. Okay. Okay. We're going to go in this thing. Just be ready to shoot, you know, if you have no compunction to kill. Here we go. And don't hesitate. And I find that line really cool because, Sir Malcolm and Vanessa, they've obviously experienced and come across these creatures before, but they show a real steel to them. And further also to your note as well, John, about Vanessa, that scene with the creature coming up over Ethan, that was one of my favorite scenes. There's just this unseen power from Vanessa. She has this thing. She's so mysterious and it's peppered throughout the whole series and in episode 1 as well. She seems to know stuff. She's a lot more, obviously the opening scene is testament to that. She's meditating in front of a crucifix. The spiders come up. But she's very kind of mysterious, and the fact that she could go look this creature in the eye and it backs down. To me, that was a really big wow moment. And I love that sort of stuff. Yeah,
that's a moment when you know you're going to need to watch Vanessa Ives, isn't it? One of the things I really like about Malcolm is that he is a very stereotypical character in the Victorian times. You know that there was these explorers that came back from their foreign travels and effectively were knighted immediately, and then they lived in the land of privilege from that point onwards. Without having a character like Malcolm here, this company could not possibly be formed. The reason why they take Ethan is because he's effectively looking for money. He's on the run. He needs money and they need a gun hand, so they take him on. The reason why they get Victor Frankenstein on board is because, as they say, he has the heart of a poet and the bank account of one too. So they get him on board because Malcolm has the money to pay for it. I really like that it all circles around Malcolm. He needs all these people and he has the money and willingness to do it. But they also play into the fact that he is an explorer and a hunter. Throughout the world, he's gone on these hunts many times, and now he has to do one in search of his daughter. Whether they have a good relationship or not, what comes across often with Malcolm is it's still his daughter. It's still the person he has to save. He can't just leave her and walk away. So,
no, but I think to Ray's point as well, I think there's an inner explorer within him, and he talks in a later episode about the Holy Grail, which is the source of the Nile, and it was this obsession, and it's now that he's trying to follow that river of superstition to these unusual creatures that he knows are there, to find out more. And I think that's really interesting. I think as well, not that I'm drawn to Malcolm Murray, but as a geographer, you know, the Royal Geographical Society, you go in there and you see all these people that have done exploration back in that time, and it was certainly founded around that kind of element. There's an uncomfortable relationship here with that subject, and I suppose British exploration back in the Victorian period. But all these, you know, the naming of mountains and the naming of rivers, finding Victoria Falls, you know, the fact that this, you know, a huge waterfall, on the border of Zimbabwe and Botswana happens to be called Victoria Falls after, you know, a queen that reigns so many, miles away. It is just kind of slightly, so it's slightly sort of grating in a sense, but it's kind of, that's what they did. And I find that immensely kind of interesting, that kind of element to this. I think.
Absolutely. I know we're going to talk a lot more about Malcolm Murray as the series goes on. That's his main introduction though to the show. Ray, do you want to take us on to our next major character in the show?
Yeah, I was just fascinated, I think, with the Vanessa Ives character. Straight from the get-go, the opening scene, as I mentioned, and it's cyclical as well. I mean, her appearance in the first episode ends with the same thing. She's back praying in front of the crucifix, and you have this, obviously some sort of demonic influence with these spiders coming out. She gets a lot of airplay, I think, in this episode, which is really good because, as you mentioned, Derek, Ethan Chandler is the POV, but with Vanessa, we get so many like hints and clues as to what she may be capable of. And I find that just very intriguing, and it's a nice little technique, obviously, for the writing to keep people baited, you know, with characters that are, you know, not totally fleshed out. And Eva Green, she does a fantastic job all throughout. I think all 3 seasons. She really brings an A game. She invests totally in the character. And I could say that about all the actors actually as well. Great performances all round. But, yeah, as mentioned with John, I find a few moments for her, which really did pinpoint it. First time when she comes across, Ethan Chandler, she does almost a Sherlock Holmes-esque observation of him. So she's very intelligent, very observant. I love that because you know that she's, you know, she's come prepared. And also then in the nest, when she she stares off that creature, a big moment for her, but she says a lot of stuff as well. And there's one thing that she does say to Ethan Chandler. There's a scene in the first episode when she's talking about the demi-monde, and she's got the cards coming out, and, Ethan says something like, what do you seek to escape? And she says, perhaps the same thing you do. We all have our curses. And that's very kind of important because she comes up with these sorts of observations again and again, not only with Ethan, but she says it also to Victor Frankenstein. So she seems to know a lot more than she should know.
Absolutely.
And again, that just lends itself to making her quite an interesting character.
Without a doubt. Like she was probably the linchpin of the show at the time. You know, Timothy Dalton was a former Bond, but had only done some minor roles in some things in the past. He'd done some major movies after that, but getting him on TV was quite a big moment for them. But Eva Green was kind of at the height of her stardom when this show started and continued in that stardom. Josh Hartnett, who plays Ethan Chandler, he didn't have a massive movie career either. So I think the first poster that was released for Penny Dreadful at the time was Eva Green because she's such an intriguing character on her own. And you definitely tell that everybody is looking to see who this character is from the first moment she's on board. That first scene with Ethan where she's saying to him, you know, I can see you have bad shoes, bad trousers, but an amazing watch. So you come from privilege, but you don't have any money, basically. So she can cut him down instantly just by a look, you know?
Yeah, she was also in a Bond as well. So again, part of this alumni. But I completely agree that line, we all have our curses, don't we, is probably the line that I would think would sum up the first season because she's talking in terms of with Ethan Chandler. And of course, with these murders happening, there is the suggestion that Ethan is involved in this, it's kind of ruled out that it's vampires because they're not drained with blood. There's a suggestion that these murders are possibly Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
Again, linking into all this sort of gruesome loveliness of Victorian London, and, effectively the New York of its time. So we know that he's got issues, and you're wondering as well, what are hers? We want to know what a superpower, in a sense, is. I feel like she's a conduit of some, that's why she can do the seance later on in episode 2. You have the tarot cards, but she feels things. She gets she can link to Mina, that we see as well. Yeah. But then she also comes to Malcolm in this episode, which is really nice, where you suddenly see her sort of transformed into blood red eyes and vampire fangs. But I think that they've all, Victor has got his curse. He's been cursed. He's been touched by death, in a sense, and he wants to overcome that. Malcolm's it's that empire exploration. Yeah. Victor, as I say, death, but that god complex. You have even Semembe, maybe in terms of that exploitation, maybe he was involved in selling his fellow tribespeople, that kind of thing that happened. That exploitation of those relationships amongst, or divisions amongst tribes that was done by white Europeans. So even Vanessa, there is a conceit to her as well, I think, in this. They've got their curses that are in reality, but probably Vanessa's goes deeper a bit than that, along with Ethan, in that there is a superstition element to it here.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about Penny Dreadful as a show as a whole, is that none of these people are good people. It comes across quite quickly that none of these people are good people as such. They're just bound together. And I think that's really evident with Vanessa. She's bound here. She has to go on this journey with Malcolm because it was her friend. And there's some transgression, something that she's talking about that isn't said, something about Malcolm that we don't know about in his past, but we know the two of them, regardless of money, regardless of what's going on, and regardless of what supernatural elements they find, they will continue with this mission to save Mina until the very end, effectively.
Definitely.
There seems to be like a redemptive element to it for Vanessa. As you mentioned, Derek, one of my the main points for Vanessa is this transgression, which she drops. And she mentions again and again in the episode. So it's all about, what did she do? What has she done to Mina? Why does she want to redeem herself?
Yeah.
And so that's one of actually the main crumbs for her, because it directly links her to her relationship with Malcolm. Sir Malcolm. It's quite interesting.
Can I just say as well, at the start where the spider comes down from the cross and kind of almost like rears up to her on her hand, is just like kind of really awesome shot.
It is.
I don't think I could actually stay there with a steady hand as a spider did that, but nonetheless, I thought that was a really cool kind of shot, actually.
But even overall, the two comparatives of this character, when she's alone in her room, praying, and she feels like she's fervently praying to God, effectively, to save her from all the things that she's experiencing. It's just that fragility between those moments when she's alone versus that kind of confidence she has with everybody else around her. She knows more than everybody else when she's in a room with any other person, but when she's alone, she seems just completely fragile and breakable. She seems to want to be saved from all of these things she's experiencing. That's what seems to come across in that first episode. I think that just makes her such a fascinating character to watch.
Yeah. Definitely.
I'm going to take us on to our final major character in the show, Victor Frankenstein, played by Harry Treadway. We're speaking about Harry Treadway at the moment over on Star Trek Picard because he plays one of the Romulan villains over there now, and he's playing magnificently on that show. He's really good. It's interesting to see this actor at a much younger age now, 5 or 6 years ago, playing this incredible character, Victor Frankenstein. So this entire show is a total love letter to penny dreadfuls and to horror stories from the Victorian era all the way throughout the 1900s, late 1800s into the 1900s. And the character of Victor Frankenstein is our first character really that we're introduced to that I think most people watching the show will know instantly from the name. They'll go, Frankenstein, I know. Victor Frankenstein, that must be the guy that created the monster, right? Okay, right. So we know him instantly. And I think they just knock you off balance with this character because you feel with his youth that he hasn't started his progression towards reanimating corpses. That's all we really know about Victor Frankenstein. If you think back before this show, right? Think about your knowledge of the character. You don't really know much. You know, he created the monster, and you know, the monster was chased down with pitchforks and fire. And that's kind of it. There's no real depth to the character. You know, he existed in that world and in that universe. Whereas what we have here is this brilliantly played character who is just desperate to pierce the veil between life and death. I love the poetry of that line as well. This concept of this scientist who is invited by Malcolm into this kind of explorers group of scientists, but has total disregard for it because he feels this idea of exploring things that already exist, exploring mountains or going out and looking at space. Those things don't interest him at all. The only valuable science is bringing people back to life and allowing life to become eternal. I think he's fascinating in those moments, especially when he's invited into this circle and doesn't want anything to do with it. All he wants from Malcolm is the money to be able to pursue his actual goal.
Yeah. Well, he says he explores the difference between life and death, and he has that great sort of conversation with Malcolm in the Explorers Club, and he says, you know, that's my river, my mountain, and where he will place his flag. So it's really interesting. You know, and again, I think we see that he's a little, you know, later on I think it's in episode 3 where we kind of get a bit of a flashback to his early life. We see this, kind of lovely difference between whether it's science and art, or he talks about science and superstition walk hand in hand. Or I think that's Malcolm Murray's line to him, which is really an interesting take, and kind of, as you say, coming back to say Shelley, this idea of the new technology of electricity and this idea of being able to reanimate, and the possibilities that science provided in the world, but how that could be used by authors or artists, or poets or whatever, to either go against it, to try and counter it, or to embrace it, to see how they could develop a new kind of story, I think is fascinating as well. And I think that really lies here with Victor, Frankenstein's character. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love how he is not just your run-of-the-mill kind of scientist doctor. Mm-hmm. He does have that inclination towards the poetic as well, because for me, he is really like he is your typical artist. You know, he serves a higher purpose. Yeah. He seeks patronage from these people like Sir Malcolm, but he doesn't like that class. He doesn't like that society at all. I mean, he looks so uncomfortable in that club, you know. And when he was speaking to Malcolm, he just shot him down. Like, he was just so intense. Like, I am pursuing something far more important than you.
Absolutely.
You know, that was basically what he was saying. Yeah. And so he would obviously take his money because he needs it for his research. Yeah. But so I find him really fascinating in the sense, and again, we see, later on him with his favorite, poetry or literature that he goes. So he does have that, the heart of a poet in him.
As I say, I do love the line from Malcolm, the heart of a poet and the bank account to match it. I think it makes total sense for this character. I must say the makeup on this actor, on Harry Treadway, where he's got the kind of bloodshot eyes and massive red bags underneath it, showing that he is so totally consumed by this pursuit that he has to bring a corpse back to life that he hasn't slept in months, it looks like, you know, and when he is dolled up in his beautiful tuxedo going into this, he doesn't look any better. It doesn't improve him at all. He still looks like he has just rolled out. Well, he hasn't rolled out of bed because he hasn't gone to bed. It looks like he's just, I got to do this. I've got to get there, and maybe I'll be able to secure the funds that I need to do this. But it kind of leads on to that moment where he goes back to his hidden lab. You realize he's being followed. We'll talk about that next episode, but he goes back to his hidden lab, and this is our Victor Frankenstein. We have that moment, very similar, or I suppose staged quite similar to what we've seen him before. We have the power going out, we have the lightning strike, and we have this corpse that disappears in the room and then suddenly reappears in the corner cowering. I think this is just a beautifully put together and beautifully produced scene, because in the past, this has ended with that, I suppose, iconic moment where you have Victor Frankenstein screaming, "It's alive" to the skies. Whereas here we have this beautiful music by the composer, Abel Korzeniowski. It's just beautiful, underpinning the sadness of this idea of this corpse who suddenly appeared to life with no knowledge of who it is, what it is, no knowledge of its history or past, cowering in the corner, trying to work out what's going on in its life. And you have Victor approaching him, trying to cow him and trying to calm him down and bring him into the world again. I just think it's a fascinatingly put together scene, and it does play into stuff in the future.
It's really beautiful, that first interaction between the two. And as you say, I think the music is amazing. I think even just quickly on the music, I think it is fantastic. It's rich, it's sad, and the opening titles as well. I mean, I sometimes get drawn into the music. It adds that additional layer of emotional connection to the piece, and you really feel the fear in what becomes Proteus, and the fear and the loneliness coming into this world is really good. Yeah. I love the touch as well that as he's alive, then all the stitching starts to bleed. It's just a nice little detail. Yeah. So you see him on the table and it's all stitched, and then he's kind of just covered in blood sort of running down from the stitches, which is a really nice touch. It's a clever touch in the same way as changing how that first interaction of Frankenstein and his monster, and even just the fact that, he realized I've created a monster. Here he doesn't believe that at all. It's that he now wants to sort of bring him forward into this world. He's combated death in that sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that end scene as well. It was really well put together, as you say. And Derek, I know we've had conversations like years ago. I think it was during the Daredevil Netflix show about music and how music can really make or break a series.
Absolutely.
And Penny Dreadful is fortunate enough to have brilliant music. It just really does tug at the heartstrings, and it's very emotional.
Yeah.
With the final scene there, I don't know about you guys, I found it really good, exactly as you said. But there was so much tension for me as well. I was just waiting for that creature, Proteus, to snap or something, because he's essentially inhuman, right? And he's just come to life, and you just don't know what he'll do.
Absolutely.
So although there was this very high level emotional scene with them kind of communicating with each other, I was just left on the edge of my seat just going, oh gosh, something better not happen, something violent better not happen. I'm not prepared for this. So I found the ending really, really effective in that sense, and they kept that tension up. And I'm glad they ended, with that.
Absolutely, ending with the line, "I am Victor Frankenstein," because he is now the character of Victor Frankenstein that we all recognize from Mary Shelley's novel. So quickly, finally, on the music, I suppose, just to point out, we watched 4 episodes of this over the last week, and not once did I ever feel like skipping either the opening or closing credits on this show. The music is so beautifully put together. It's even, after that scene of the "I am Victor Frankenstein," there is a full credit sequence, and I watched the whole thing because the music plays into it, or plays out of the episode and into these beautiful credits. So a fantastic job by Abel Korzeniowski for this episode. I think that's it for our main points. We always talk a little bit longer than we expected. So, guys, any notes on the first episode of the show?
Yeah, for me, I just want to mention the flamboyant Mr. Lyle, who is the head of the Department of Egyptian and Obsidian Antiquities, of which it's really just Egyptian, as he says. I love this character so much. Flamboyant, foppish, you name it. He drives the idea of the with the hieroglyphics, bringing in Amunet, Amun-Ra, this idea of this blood cure, or as they describe it, blood curse, from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the afterlife. So, I love him being pulled in here, for sure. And
absolutely. I love his response to when he's being dragged into it by Malcolm, where he's going, "This is urgent." And he goes, "There's nothing urgent about Egyptology in over 2000 years."
Just so good. And even just, the skin, of the vampire when, Victor is kind of doing the autopsy on him, and it's like this, skin and the plates of an insect. And I was just thinking of the scarab beetle, given that he has those beetles there, in his office, because they're good at stripping the flesh. So again, even in the comfortable surrounds of the British Museum, it's kind of there's this kind of little bit of grotesque being brought out, which is really nice. But I love Mr. Lyle. I think actually some of the supporting characters as well are just so strong and have their impact in the show. And he is certainly one of them for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a really big character, I think, for me as well. He brings a lot of relief to the show when there's a lot of tension. Very likable immediately as well. Interesting again, notes, I compared Vanessa's interaction with him. She's very standoffish towards him. She kind of almost shuts him down every time. She doesn't have any time for any of his exuberance about things. But I love his dialogue as well. One quote I put here was he's talking about papyri. And it sounds like something eaten by little Persian boys.
Exactly.
Just crazy kind of stuff. And just going also, Derek, a note about Victor Frankenstein. He's so driven, as you said, with the makeup and all that. And the only thing that really brings him out of his kind of stupor is when he sees that inhuman body of that vampire. That's the only thing that really gets him. He wants to get those Sir Malcolm and Vanessa away from his autopsy or his studies, but she unsheathes the corpse of this vampire, and only then does he actually go, okay. And he's straight onto it, and he starts dissecting it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love his description of that, where he's saying, well, either we have a person who's 2,000 years old and put hieroglyphics all over themselves and developed an endoskeleton to cover their bodies, and has sharpened their teeth, or we have something else. I love that he is totally scientific about it. He is going to investigate this thing because it's massively intriguing for him. But I like that he gives them the option to say, well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it isn't something supernatural, but obviously he's in from there on. One final thing that I just wanted to say about the episode. A lot of the production for this show, as it was a co-production that was done between Sky Europe and Showtime in the US, a TV channel. They did a lot of production in Dublin and Ireland, where myself and John are based. It's fascinating at times seeing some of the buildings that they used in the show, because Dublin's a very small city. The population's only about 1.5 million people. And a lot of these buildings are places we walk past every day. They've just been dressed so well to look like they're from the Victorian era. But there's times when you're going, oh, I had my lunch over there last Friday, and right beside where that scene is taking place. So it's kind of fun to have those moments.
It is good fun.
But brilliant production design overall.
Did you find it detracting in any way to have such a recognizable building, architecture around?
Weirdly, it's not. Like I literally used to work right beside the place where Sir Malcolm's office is, or his house is. I used to work right beside that and walk past that every day for about 7 years. And there's kind of a bit of pride that it's still able to be used to form part of the Victorian era on the show, and it's so well dressed. Have a look at the extras for the series. They show you how the green screen was used and how much work was done by the digital effects people to change what is a very contemporary location and just take the element that is Victorian and put it into the Victorian setting. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the stuff. A lot is around Dublin Castle as well, and the thing is it's the interesting thing is that you see it in this, and you kind of go, that feels more real, that there would be some kind of life around it. Whereas obviously now it's more of a tourist attraction. And so you can't, Dublin Castle was used for a purpose. And now it's more of an attraction in a sense. And it's like, so you see it being full of life with market, and you kind of go, that feels like real. It feels like life is going on there rather than just a visit.
Now, I will say, to answer Ray's question more appropriately, I suppose, Dublin Castle is used for about 6 different locations in the show, and they literally just move the camera around a bunch of times to use the different locations. But that is a little bit distracting at times. You're kind of going, well, you know, London may be small, but it's literally not a market right beside a person's house. But I think it's still a bit of pride. At least, you know, it's a very short tour if you want to do the Penny Dreadful tour of Dublin.
Yeah, and I think they use the Botanical Gardens, the National Botanical Gardens as well, and Dublin Zoo in Phoenix Park as well.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. That's it for our discussion on episode 1 of Penny Dreadful. Nice work. We're going to take a little break, and after this message, we'll be back with our discussion about episode 2 of Penny Dreadful, Séance.
Hi, I'm one of the High Priests of Khonshu Ray, and I have the sacred privilege of providing you, the loony listener, with a podcast honouring Marvel's very own Moon Knight. So join me and a host of others at Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or support the show by becoming a Patreon member. Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. It's time to get your Khonshu on.
Welcome back to TV Podcast Industries. We're continuing our discussions about Penny Dreadful with episode 2 of the series, Séance. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Welcome back, Penny Faithful. Yes, I'm one of your other hosts, John.
And joining us again, we have Ray.
Hey guys, how you going? Very happy to talk about episode 2 for Penny Dreadful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great to continue this discussion, a healthy discussion on the first episode. I'm looking forward to talking about the second one, because this probably still to this day is probably the one that's remembered by most people that watch the series, I think. Just from that title, we know exactly what it's about, the Séance. If anybody wants to find it, if anybody goes, right, I need that episode that had the big moment for Vanessa in it. What's it called again? Oh, Séance. Grant. I know exactly which one it is. This episode was directed again by J.A. Bayona and again written by the showrunner, John Logan. John, do you want to give us a summary for episode 2?
Sure. Vanessa and Sir Malcolm encounter the mysteriously beautiful Dorian Gray at a party. However, things take a turn when renowned medium Madame Carly hosts a séance. Meanwhile, Ethan befriends Miss Brona Croft, a young Irish immigrant, and Victor Frankenstein gets a visit from his firstborn.
Now, here's the shocking ending you were expecting on the first episode, right?
Yes, it's still traumatizing, actually.
Yeah.
It really is. This is a great episode of the show. I just want to start off really by saying that it is absolutely strikes back into my memory that first feeling I had watching the first episode, the first time I saw it 5-6 years ago. It really brings back up exactly those same feelings in me, those same scared, oh my God, what the hell's happening? Oh my God, this is a show I'm going to watch until it ends. It's absolutely what it did for me.
Well, that's it. It's like Victor needs to work on his stitch work, I think. If it had been just a little tighter, maybe it could have withheld the hands of his firstborn.
Maybe.
Because then I was thinking maybe he couldn't have played Ring a Ring of Roses, because like the centrifugal force would just sort of all of a sudden the other person on the other side would just be left with Proteus's kind of arms because the stitching.
I am so impressed that you've made a Victorian joke on a show.
Exactly.
Very impressed. John.
All about the pox.
This episode, we're going to talk about our big moments from episode 2. Not as constructed, I suppose, around individual characters as they were in the first episode. John, do you want to take us off with your big moment for episode 2 of the show?
I'm so glad I was first on this because I just grabbed it. And yes, it is the séance with Madame Carly, collected London elite, and Malcolm Murray and Vanessa Ives. I mean, for me, when I think of this show, I do think of this séance. I think it is a great moment, if not one of the greatest and most iconic kind of scenes from TV, and dare I say even film, that I've ever seen. It is just one of my favorite scenes. I have 2 séance scenes actually that are up there. This is one for its it just scares the bejesus out of you. And because it's the way Vanessa commands the room, and the performance that just draws you in. And for me as an audience member, I felt uncomfortable. I was wriggling, I was squirming, I was feeling kind of Malcolm Murray's kind of probably idea that he wants to hide under the table, effectively as she lays bare his infidelity that he has with his wife, the death of his son, and the pressure of Malcolm and what he put on his son, and in a sense the ambivalence that he gives to his daughter and how Mina sees that, certainly with having the son. And I just think, it's so uncomfortable. She absolutely embodies being possessed. She certainly steals the scene from Madame Carly, who kind of, you're thinking at that moment that she's really she's kind of a false seance, that it's just someone coming in, she's doing the usual tricks, although she is a very important character in her own right for season 2. So she's not as false as we think in this. For sure. Yeah,
but she does feel like it's a parlor trick that she just goes house to house, whoever pays her the money, and she just kind of shows them kind of what a seance could be like.
Exactly.
But you're right, it is terrifying. I think it goes on for such a long time, much longer than you would expect the possession of Vanessa Ives to go on, and that makes it so, it kind of knocks you off center.
Definitely. And I think, just quickly, the other seance one is the seance from Good Omens, which we also covered, and that, from a comedic point of view, is also up there with here, but this just for sheer squirminess and just the power of Vanessa Ives in this is just a sight to behold. It's great TV.
Yeah. John, if these big moments in this show was part of a Boxing Day sale, you and I would have been grabbing for the same one. I think we all would have been going for it. But I thought I'd pick up the Proteus scene at the end. But yeah, this seance is absolutely remarkable. I don't watch that many horror films and shows. So when I do see a seance like this and someone's possessed, and Eva Green does a fantastic job, it is utterly like mesmerizing. With the point with Madame Carly, though, you mentioned, she could be a fake. She does mention, though, like, she does sense that someone else is there. So she does pick up on this other demon or being that Vanessa kind of taps into.
Yeah.
If it's, this was a really fantastic. I can't believe it. Yeah, actually, it did go a bit longer than you'd expect, but, you're captivated the whole way through. Absolutely. And it does reveal, obviously, the Sir Malcolm, bits of, family, history, which helps as a viewer. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you're wondering how much to trust, I suppose, of the information that she's providing, because some of it could absolutely be the demon that's possessing her, trying to knock Malcolm off his perch almost, to tell this room of his peers what he's really like at home, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I really like that. I suppose what I mean about it going on too long as well is you want it to end because it's so bloody terrifying. So you're like, okay, can we just stop now? And it keeps seeping in more and more. I think Eva Green is just transformed in this performance of this role. We talked about it in episode 1, where you have that fragility versus the confidence. This is something completely different. So she does feel like she is totally possessed by somebody outside of herself in this role. So really, really good.
Yeah, she makes a noise as well that's just kind of like, ooh, that's really scary. And the eyes. She also has some pretty fruity language around the table as well, which I think shocks a lot of sort of the polite company in which she finds herself. A lot of see you next Tuesdays, plus, whore and so on coming out here. But I love the fact that it effectively crashes Mr. Lyle's wee social fate, as he calls it. Again, just the lighter side, because it is so intense, that scene, yet you do have the lighter Mr. Lyle, as you had mentioned, Ray, on the last for episode 1. And I do like that, for probably obvious reasons, he has a slightly strange relationship with his wife, but he's kind of fairly a little derogatory by it, where he's kind of, my wife is close by, no doubt by the gin, if I am to hazard a guess. And I think hitting the gin would have been a useful thing to do here after seeing the seance. But again, when he's trying to get everyone together to come into around the table, he has a great moment, and we need to use this as well. Pay attention, please. You must pay attention to me. I love the fact that he's kind of just wants to hog the air in the room. He is this flamboyant head of Egyptology, and I love this character. Even though he kind of has hair dye that would probably suit Donald Trump, actually, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. But again, he brings that lightness to what is a really unnerving scene, and such a great one. And I think Timothy Dalton's, it's kind of this cross between need to get out of here because everyone is finding out about his dirty secrets, and just the anger. Timothy Dalton does this really good thing where he kind of exposes his teeth a little. It's almost like he's grating his teeth. And you kind of wonder what impact it will have on their relationship. But again, I think as well, it kind of adds a bit more to Vanessa Ives, that she can be a conduit for these supernatural forces in this world.
Yeah. Another, like a smaller point to this seance as well. Earlier on, we were introduced to Dorian Gray. And so can you imagine he's just come across Vanessa Ives, and one of the early things he experiences with her is attending a seance, and she just goes total cray-cray.
Exactly.
And so I think this is a little seed that's planted as well, because later on we see Dorian is quite intrigued with Vanessa. He knows that there are things not totally normal with her. And he's actually the one person that is kind of done one up on Vanessa, where she seems to have the measure of everyone. He seems to have the measure of her as well. So just a little side thing there with Dorian at that seance. But absolutely, that seance is totally brilliant. If you just want to watch a little bit of Penny Dreadful, just watch the seance. And that's enough for me, really. I mean, it's really good.
I think it will either drive you off or make you watch the rest of the show.
You'll be captivated. Absolutely.
I think, Ray, you mentioned in the notes that this would have been something that is quite usual in upper class society in the Victorian era, this idea of having a seance. It's almost like, you used to have a clown as the center of your entertainment, and then it kind of moved on and moved on and moved on. And at this point, the richest people can afford to have a seance to delight and entertain their audience. But if you do believe in the supernatural at all, the idea of the seance being the conduit for the supernatural around, if you do believe in it, the possibility that you're going to draw in Great Aunt Bessie, who has a message for one of the kids, and that'll be a good laugh for everybody around. There's also the possibility that demons can come into the room and possess someone, So if these people do believe, in this possibility, they've really got their comeuppance here. I'm not sure they'll ever go to another wee fate that has a seance at it after this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it kind of comes again to that point of the upper class within society doing a seance, and that, something maybe in terms of reading cards or that superstition being associated with less educated or the lower classes in a sense, who sort of, carry the rabbit's foot, have the crosses around the rooms, and even that it is going against probably what the church, which is such a powerful force within this world still, would say this is devil worshipping almost. And with Dorian Gray, you have, that whole capturing of him and Brona through the new camera with the lithographs, that again, high society, prim and proper, that's what we're led to expect, yet there is this sort of feasting on the flesh, so to speak, of the Victorians. And I think that's really good. Dorian is all about excess and the sort of new physical or stimulating experiences, not just physical. And I think, to your point as well, Ray, he finds a very stimulating person in Vanessa Ives here that is something new and to be consumed in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. the Séance we could probably talk about for quite a while. But Ray, do you want to take us on to another major moment for this episode?
Yeah, I chose the end bit, but I want to kind of like broaden that out to the education of Proteus. I think that was a massive moment, and I think it was very well done. Right from the previous episode, although I did mention there was a lot of tension there, what we see immediately with Proteus is that he's a very, I don't know, he's a peaceful, creature, wanting to learn, benevolent. And I loved how there was this slow education of him with Victor, taking him out. You see him interact with the bigger world, and slowly form his own, opinions. One of the touching things in this whole thing was when he starts to actually remember. And this is just towards the very end where he's at the docks and he remembers his old life. He remembers his wife. And so that raises a lot of questions with, I guess, apart from the obvious, a lot of the ethical questions that Victor Frankenstein is kind of crossing the line with. And so Proteus has this older life, comes in through, slowly comes through his memories. And the big moment is the end where he is just standing talking to Victor, talking about his dreams, about what he wants to do, what he can see, and he literally gets ripped in two by the creature behind him. It's one of those moments that it was so shocking first time that I kind of was hesitant to go, oh, do I, should I see this again? I mean, I was curious to see it again, and I was like looking at it with a finer lens, but it was certainly the big moment. We see the firstborn, and we know that Proteus was not the first creature that Victor had created, which we all assume, I guess, or we're meant to assume from the start. And he's got a lot more of an evil twist to this creature.
Yeah. I think, as I mentioned in episode 1, I think the youth of Victor Frankenstein is what they're playing with here. As I said, you felt like you were catching him early on in his career before he'd gotten the money, before he'd gotten the resources to be able to bring a corpse back to life. So you think absolutely at the end of the first episode that he's gone back and he's finally accomplished his goal. But this reveal here that he's accomplished it before and it didn't go very well, is really good reveal. Also the way it's presented with a hand coming out from the chest of Proteus, you're not sure that there's someone behind him because you can't see the creature at all behind him. You can only see the hand coming out from inside him. So it completely takes you back. You have that question in your head: what the hell's just gone on here? Is that his own hand coming through? What is it? And then the reveal that this creature is behind him, willing to take his revenge on Victor.
Yeah, it is really shocking because you can't. I mean, for me, I kind of rooted for Proteus here, learning this. I love where they go out into the world to experience everything. They bump into Brona and Ethan, who are, in the throes of first love. And in a sense, so is Victor with Proteus in that he sees his creation. But I think, when he starts to recall those memories, as you say, Ray, where he goes, I had a wife called Dorian, he goes, and suddenly this doubt comes. It's like going straight back to after his first creation. He's suddenly unsure. He's not entirely, he asks, what am I? And I think that's a really good, and then he's kind of calmed down and you think, right, okay, it's the next steps on. And then his firstborn comes in and sees, puts an end to Proteus, unfortunately. But it is that moment because I would just kind of rooted for him. Yeah, absolutely. It was played really well.
Absolutely. I think this is something that John Logan is so good at. Is you mentioned the ethical questions that it brings up. He leaves them hanging for you to make your decisions on what Victor Frankenstein has done in this episode. We'll get much more in depth into the ethical questions as the show goes on with the creature. But the idea basically is that he's a body snatcher. He's stolen this body. He without being asked, he's recreated his life and brought him back. And suddenly he starts getting back some previous memories of his previous life. And that's what makes Victor kind of question, maybe, has he done the right thing at all? I love how it's played as well. I had it in my notes, but I'll mention it here. I love how it's played that he's just sitting there humming this song, Leave Her, Johnny, Leave Her, and then starts to kind of sing it. I recognize that because I'm a gamer and I played a game called Assassin's Creed, which had lots of sea shanties in it. The song itself is a very well-known sea shanty, and I love the recognition from Victor Frankenstein is, well, he's singing that, therefore he must be a sailor. He must have a connection to the sea, and that's why he brings them out to the ocean. But none of this is explained on screen. None of this is in conversation at all. It's just left for you to recognize that Victor would know this. In the Victorian era, there's lots of sailors. If Victor hears this particular song, he knows exactly a lot of the past of this character and will kind of use that to entice him. Maybe it was Victor bringing him out to those locations where he's able to identify all the ships and kind of get that spark of his past back. It probably is quite important in Victor's research, I suppose. He doesn't want to just reanimate a corpse that doesn't know anything. He wants to bring people back to life. That's what he wants to do. He wants to make sure that life continues everlasting in a way. What's the point in bringing back everlasting life if the person doesn't know who they are? So, but there's loads of nice ethical questions in there as well.
Yeah. It makes you wonder also as well, because at the end of the episode where, how shall we call him? The creature, the firstborn coming through. Yeah. So one of the first things, I wonder if Victor must have known this, that he's imbued with massive strength, like immense strength, something inhuman as well. And yeah, I don't know. I wonder then, what is his end game with this? Obviously it's curiosity with, conquering death and creating life. But what is his end game? What is he doing? What does he want Proteus to do? Like, as you say, is he leading him towards these locations to have him wonder about or reignite his past life? But if so, what purpose would that lead as well? It's very, very interesting. It does seem, like he's thought of this idea to create life, but he hasn't thought beyond that. And that's where everything just falls apart, because he hasn't thought of the complications.
Like what's the Jurassic Park quote? They're too busy concentrating what they can do, and that they don't realize whether they should or not. Yeah, you do get that feeling that Victor Frankenstein, after that discussion in episode 1, you get that feeling that he wants to go back to the Explorers Society, the Scientific Society of Britain, and go, this is what I created. Look what I did. Am I better than all of the rest of you? Yeah. That's why he's so focused on this idea, because he feels nobody else can do what he can do because he's that smart and that intelligent. But whether he should be doing it or not, well, he shouldn't do it.
Exactly. But I wonder whether that's teased out more in the first part of episode 3. So part of me is he trying to bring his mother back? In a sense, maybe. Is it through? Yes. Is it around that, or that he does have this poetic notion as well? And you have in episode 3 where his firstborn talks. Would we be able to understand the universe by an eternity by looking at a daffodil in respect to Wordsworth? I wandered lonely as a cloud, and it's that he has this notion, and I think it is maybe that God complex as well. But I think it's related to his mother, I think.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about that again, but I don't think it's as specific as him wanting a particular person back. I think he doesn't want anybody else to experience that very formative experience that he went through. I think that might be it, something like that. Ray, any more notes on Proteus at all?
No, that was it. I'm still kind of shaking at the last scene.
At that last scene, absolutely. I'll go on to a slightly lighter character, I suppose. Brona Croft, played by Billie Piper. I want to talk a little bit about her because I think...
You say a little lighter. She is a hooker.
Well, true. Yeah. What I do like about this character, Billie Piper, at the time was very well known as being in Doctor Who. She was the main protagonist, I suppose, in the show. She was the point of view character for everything that was going on in the reboot of Doctor Who at the time. So it was fascinating to see her move into this role on this very scary show, and be this character that she is. I think the way I described her, when I wrote it down, was Northern Irish and consumption filled, where the basic characteristics of the character. But what I love is it's a fairly typical trope. When you have a show or a movie that concentrates on the Victorian era, they will talk about these kind of hard, hooker with the heart of gold kind of characters. That's the way they'll frame what's going on. But what I love in this show is that it takes the time to explore what her life is actually like.
Yeah.
What it really means to be a character like Brona, a young woman from Northern Ireland, an immigrant into the UK who's had to leave Northern Ireland because she was pushed out of it. And the reason she's moved to the UK is because she actually wanted a job in a factory. She thought that this is her way out. She's leaving a very small country for a massive city like London, thinking she can work in a factory, and the Industrial Revolution hits as she comes over. It's taken over and there are no more jobs because everything is starting to become more about mechanization and less about people being able to get jobs for an honest day's pay. So because she's a young woman, she has taken to using her body to make whatever money she needs to be able to live her life. You see that she is very poor. She doesn't have 2 cents to rub together. I love her introduction to Ethan as he's drinking whiskey at the bar. Also, great bartender. When Ethan says, do you have any whiskey? And he goes, I think the more appropriate question is, do you have any money for the whiskey?
Exactly.
But Brona arriving and taking the whiskey off Ethan and just drinking it shot for shot with Ethan shows you the kind of person that she is. And really, you can tell there's a connection between those two characters, more so than a lot of the other relationships that are going on within the episodes. I feel that Ethan and Brona do have a very kindred spirit between the two of them. Both have done bad things in their past that don't really want to talk about. They just want to move on. Which I think is really interesting. But one of the jobs that Brona takes is our introduction to probably another one of the most famous characters for this show, Dorian Gray. Is a character that comes with so much expectation of who he is. The character is based on Oscar Wilde's novel, The Portrait of Dorian Gray. So he is a character who is known as being foppish and beautiful and sexual and in every way. That is the way the character is seen. And to see his introduction here, where he just looked completely bored by this rent-for-a-minute hooker who comes in to take some pornographic lithographs for him. He just looks totally bored because she's just like every other woman he's seen before. But then the consumption hits, then the blood hits, then the moment where he realizes she's syphilitic and she's also about to die. And then he turns into this absolutely horrific character for me. You know, he is a beautiful character. The whole point of the character is that he is able to live in the upper classes and gets invited to parties that he doesn't even know anybody at just because of his beauty and because he's the type of person that has orgies and has parties at his own house. Yet in this moment where he just completely tears apart Brona for her disease, effectively, he says he's never had a dying creature before. Does she feel pain more deep than anybody else? He wants to know all about her, but in this really gorish way, which just instantly gives you the type of character that Dorian is. And I think it's great because for the rest of the show, actually, for a lot of the other episodes of the show, the way he talks and the way he interacts with people, he seems like a very pretty character who just goes about their day doing and getting whatever they want to. But in this scene, because Brona has been developed as this character that you like a lot, I took an instant dislike to Dorian.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's his need for excess, but it has to be new and stimulating. And as you say, just that moment where she coughs blood onto him, and it's just this.
God, they like to do that in this show, don't they?
You see, absolutely. You see that moment on his face where he kind of lights up because this is the something new that he isn't bored of yet. I mean, he is, as I think you mentioned it, he is almost the Victorian equivalent of a hipster. And it's kind of like avocado on toast has now become passé. He's kind of like, well, these massive orgies, it's kind of, okay, take them or leave them. But an orgy with people coughing blood on me, now that's something different.
Something new.
Yeah,
exactly.
And something new. So he's very, he's prim proper. He acts that high society, but he is depraved, and totally about the excesses of the mind, the body, he's a very tough character in that sense because he's so charming as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think Dorian Gray, I absolutely agree with both of you as well, but I think what makes him so repulsive is his total self-absorption with this. As you mentioned, John, the excesses, but he has no regard. He has no regard for Brona's condition or how she is feeling with her, her condition as well. It's all about feeding what he finds interesting, what he finds nice. And that is, I think, the core of why he is such a despicable character. And he is all about the excesses as well. But, so I was like you, Derek, as well. I mean, as you say, he's very handsome man, on the surface, and this is, pure Dorian Gray. On the surface, he's very, very good looking, but underneath, he's just a monster, really. It was a great introduction to him.
Absolutely. And just does anything for himself. It's very much it. And I just like the introduction to Brona here. I definitely wanted to talk about this character because I think she's so well played.
Yeah.
Every time she's on the screen, I think you kind of go, I hope this week it's going to go okay for Brona. I hope she's going to get some good news here. Maybe she'll find a person that will take care of all of her needs and bring her to hospital and take care of her. But unfortunately, she doesn't seem to be that character for a lot of these early episodes, at least.
It's really weird. When I first watched this as well, I really didn't like her Northern Irish accent. It didn't feel right.
Mm-hmm. I know what you mean.
But in rewatching it, it feels absolutely pitch perfect now. I don't know what it was.
It's from living over here for longer, John.
Yeah, well, that's probably it. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I love some of her turn of phrases as well. Just like, oh, my lungs are buggered, and so on. It's just really nice, but I think her accent is really good. But I remember first time round, I was thinking, oh no, I thought that was actually the weakest part of this series at the time, was her accent. But I don't get that at all, in this kind of rewatch at all.
The great thing about this series, and we're only delving into episode 2, is that there is a sizable cast and all of the characters are so intriguing. The great thing about what John Logan's doing is that he's paying attention to all of them and none of them seem to, I mean, in this episode and in episode 1, Vanessa gets a lot of the limelight, but she does take a back seat in the subsequent episodes as well, allows the others to flesh out their story. And I think he really does balance all these characters really well. And Brona is, at the beginning as well, I found her, because she wasn't one of the classical characters of literature, I was the least interested in her, but she has a very compelling story. And we'll get to it later on with episode 3, definitely episode 4. I really find it quite interesting. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I think that's one of the interesting balances that Logan does with this show. Effectively, Dorian Gray is not a central character. He shouldn't be. He's not part of the team. He's not going after the supernatural. He is supernatural in himself. He's a peripheral character that is brought in and brought to the forefront whenever is needed. But I do like how they do that with many characters over the course of the show. I think it's really fascinating. That's it for my big point for episode 2. Any notes we haven't talked about in the episode?
I've got a few.
Okay.
Again, coming back to Dorian's pornography, it sounds like I'm obsessed and I'm not. I can absolutely put that up front, Penny Faithful. But certainly the interesting thing I'm going to pull out of it is that there's a long history of this in Victorian society, based around Holywell Street. And it was called the home of the dirty book trade.
Nice.
And it's kind of quite nice because as well, Penny Dreadful in terms of the title is about these small, almost precursors to comics in a sense, these horror, novella, being thrown out and we see being turned into plays, as well, that were consumed, sort of en masse, almost like a proto, magazine. And it was same. So just that element, for me there.
Yeah, we do get our first mention of Penny Dreadfuls in here, don't we? We hear from the police officers that are investigating the murders that are going on. They mentioned this sounds like something that comes out of those Penny Dreadfuls. Yeah. So it is something that is a mass market production of little horror stories to scare you before you go to bed kind of thing. So I like that they mentioned it within the show.
Exactly. And that's kind of, there is another attack here in the park with the lamplighter and the lady eating the apple as well. So again, these attacks that happened in the first episode are kind of continuing. Yeah. There is a really nice moment where we see Ethan at the site of the first attack with the police there as well. So again, just connecting him to that scene and what curse he may have.
I have to say, I kept wondering after that opening scene, this episode, where you see the hand, so the arm ripped off and the hand just sitting there with the apple in it. I was wondering, is this going to be the way the show goes every episode? We're going to open with this slaughtering of some character that doesn't look like they're going to get slaughtered, you know? Is it just going to be that every episode? The first episode being, you know, the mother and daughter getting slaughtered, and then this episode, just a woman eating an apple on a bench gets her arm torn off. So.
And something just around the séance as well, that, and it connects back to episode 1. It's kind of informative again of Malcolm's character, I suppose, where Vanessa asks through his son's sort of medium, did you name a mountain after me? And we know the answer is no, because we have in episode 1 where he says, I named a mountain after myself. Despite his son dying on that trip through dysentery, probably because he needed to be there to prove to his father that he was capable and an explorer. So again, just to like connect that to his character. And
I like that. Now I named it after myself.
Basically. So, you know, pretty low blow there from Malcolm. And then I suppose we do get a little more flesh on the bone of the Egyptian mythology as well. This idea that, the cojoining of Amunet, and Amun-Ra forebodes the end of man, effectively. And I think Mr. Lyles talks that, you know, don't tell her this because who wants to know that they're being hunted by the devil? So again, you know, this really kind of makes her position so much more precarious, you know, and very strong, yet external factors making her fragile, effectively, that, you know, she's been hunted by something so powerful. Is she up to that task? We don't know. So I thought that was pretty nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a few just here, just further to what John was saying, about those scenes with the attacks. I found it interesting that they are at the very beginning, but you can almost like forget about them because they're at the beginning and there's so much happening in the main part of the episode that it becomes like left on the wayside. But it is good because it does keep on bubbling away and it does progress the character. You know, I'm not going to say it now, but it just progresses where that kind of ends up. So, I just find I remember on first viewing, just watching it going, it's good because it connects it with Jack the Ripper, but where is this going? It's not really doing much.
Yeah. I absolutely was wondering whether the show was going to explore who Jack the Ripper was at the beginning.
Yeah.
But they have this drop line in this episode where they go, oh, well, it can't be Jack because it's not the same MO. He just goes after any woman or anybody. It doesn't matter their class or their status. So, so I was kind of going, okay, well, why is this in here then? You know, it would make a lot of sense if they decided in with Jack the Ripper and that was part of what was going on in the show, but yeah.
Well, you have that great moment as well where Malcolm goes to the police station and the detective in charge where he says, you need to change your mode of operandi because you need to hunt a monster. You don't need to detect. It's about hunting, you know, and as that explorer. But he's the kind of on a recce for himself because that's where we kind of find out that, you know, there are no teeth marks in the sides of the neck. They aren't drained of blood and that actually they've been ripped apart. And it's something where we see that is not Jack the Ripper who effectively, sliced, and to kill his hookers, in Soho or Clerkenwell or wherever he killed people in Victorian London.
You forgot to research that bit, didn't
I
you?
did, yes. He killed them in London.
Yes.
Yes. There we go.
Yeah. And just a couple of things with the séance. I think, Derek, you touched upon it as well. Very popular during the age and as you say, John, this underbelly of the Victorian era. But this was more of a I guess it was more of a naughty thing to do, as you're saying, like it goes against the church and it was something quite, dangerous potentially. Anyway, so table turning or seances were very common. Mesmerism, or they used to call it animal magnetism was very a popular thing there, where people would be almost possessed. And funnily enough, this was a precursor to the Ouija board, which I didn't realize, but that got its origin from a board game from Parker Brothers. So for those of people that stand by the Ouija board and believe it, it was a board game, and it's become something bigger. So
created by the people that brought us Monopoly afterwards. Yeah,
yes. No, I was going to say exactly. Trivial Pursuit as well. It's from the Parker Brothers. Yeah. Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, what a diverse board game range they have.
Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely.
And just finally, with Amunet and Amun-Ra, I did a bit of digging. I thought this sounded really cool in the show. Unfortunately, with the mythology, it doesn't extend to that. Although Amunet and Amun-Ra were one of the first gods or deities of Egyptian culture. Amunet gets replaced by Mut, who becomes the main partner of Amun-Ra, and Amunet is more a protector of pharaohs. So she's still known as the Hidden One, but there's no dark side element to her.
There is an easy to consume history of this as well, called The Mummy, the film.
Oh dear.
Yes.
Okay.
So if anyone wants kind of the lighter hearted sort of look in Amunet and Amun-Ra, it is the Mummy series. One of my favourite sort of trashy kind of films. It's not trashy. It's just good fun.
No. It's very trashy. I'm not too sure how historically accurate it is.
Probably not at all. But it's good fun.
I think they may have just kind of pointed a finger, found a name in a book, and then created a history around it for the show. That's it. That's our discussion on episode 2 of Penny Dreadful Séance. What a great episode that was.
Definitely. I think one of my favourites ever. And as I say, the Good Omens version of the Séance, from a comedic point of view, you should definitely check out our coverage of that, because I have to say, I just couldn't stop laughing, which is the complete opposite of this one. And they are two of my favourite Séance scenes ever. I think there may only be 2, but these are really good.
Very strong episode. I think to follow up from the first episode, which really has to set the bar, for this episode to raise the bar even higher is an immense thing. So, it really bodes well for the series if you watch it from beginning to end.
Absolutely.
The journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see how episode 3 compares. We're going to take a little break and we'll be back with episode 3. Hi, this is Derek from TV Podcast Industries. We hope you're keeping safe and well at this time, and hopefully we're providing a little bit of entertainment to get you through some of the boredom that comes along with what's been going on at the moment. If you've been enjoying the podcast, we'd love if you subscribe to us at tvpodcastindustries.com, or you can support us by going over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries. You can also support us by leaving a review on your podcast catcher of choice, or of course, you can share the podcast with any of your friends, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love. Remember, we've covered many, many shows over all the years that we've been podcasting. We've covered things like Gotham, The Boys on Amazon Prime. We've covered Pennyworth, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Agent Carter, Luke Cage, Iron Fist. So if you've enjoyed the coverage that you've been listening to, hopefully you'll check out some of the other shows that we've done. And we've got lots more to come. And thank you, as always, so much for listening. Welcome back, Penny Faithful. We're here talking about episode 3 of Penny Dreadful, season 1, Resurrection. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hi there, Penny Faithfulers. I am one of your other hosts, John.
And I'm Ray. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here.
Our third co-host, Ray. Yes, really good. I'm not too sure whether this Penny Faithful is tripping off everybody's tongue as it normally does.
There's a lot of P's.
There is.
Yeah. A lot of P's, but sure. Yeah, Faithlers, or I did think of saying Dreaders, but then people might think it's dreadlocks. I don't know.
Yeah. Or I think we were talking earlier on about dreadful listeners to the Dreadful podcast, which
yes,
we don't ever want to call our listeners dreadful, do we?
Absolutely not.
We can call our podcast dreadful as a joke because we think the podcast hopefully is quite good.
Yes,
but we get the joke, so it's okay.
Yeah, no feedback on that point. Thank you.
Exactly. Let's jump into our discussion on episode 3. This episode was directed by Irish director Dervla Walsh. We discussed her work back on The Punisher season 1. She directed episode 5.
Okay, yes. I remember that because I think, we were just like going, Dervla is one of those names that is so unusual in terms of how it's spelt and how it's pronounced. Very typically sort of Irish as well, in that sense.
Exactly. And as we mentioned before, a lot of the show was filmed in Ireland. So getting in a local director like Dervla was quite cool. She kicked off most of her career back then, but really good to see that she's still working, 5-6 years on. She's still working in these Hollywood TV shows. Most recently, she directed an episode of Handmaid's Tale as well. So, likes the dystopian, likes the dark, like Punisher. So, nice to have her on board here.
Definitely. And also just speaking of Irish names, what we didn't mention possibly in the previous episode is Brona is Gaelic for sadness. And of course, her storyline does get sad.
Yes, sure. Yes, it does. Yes, the term for I'm very sorry is Tá Brón Orm, which is I have sadness on me is the literal translation of that. So Brona does come from that. I do feel sorry for any child who may have watched this show and has the name Brona and realized that their parents were obviously very unhappy to have their first child. Called Brona. It's really harsh, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a harsh truth. My gosh.
Isn't it? Once again, as we mentioned before, these episodes are being written by John Logan, the showrunner for the show. John, do you want to give us a synopsis of what happens in episode 3, Resurrection?
Sure. A flashback reveals Victor Frankenstein's motivation for delving into the questions of life and death. Flashbacks also show the history of Victor's firstborn. The creature was born in a state of unending agony, and Victor fled, rejecting his creation. It eventually came into contact with actor Vincent Brand, who gives him a job working with the stage equipment and rigging at the theatre. He has a very particular request for his maker, a female companion. After her experience at the Séance, Vanessa continues to have a spiritual link with Mina, who is desperate to be saved from the creatures around her. It leads them, including Ethan Chandler in need of money, to London Zoo, where they have an encounter with wolves, among other creatures.
Yes, London Zoo, or the Phoenix Park in Dublin Zoo.
Yes,
one or the other. It still looks like a Victorian zoo at the time, so it's a nice location for that scene, and also a really interesting moment here with Ethan as he quells the oncoming wolves, the oncoming pack. Indications of where this show might be going in the future.
Yes, yeah. There's really now a kind of push with Ethan's character. I find with this as well. I mean, it's been very ambiguous to begin with. But yeah, this we kind of start to get a sense of what might happen.
Mm-hmm. Everybody has their curses, right?
Yes.
Anybody else jump out of their seat with excitement when you saw the creature asking for the bride of Frankenstein? Anybody else go, oh my God, that's the way they're going to go with this show. That's awesome. I did.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. The whole interaction between Victor and the creature was just very reminiscent of the Mary Shelley story, classic. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was Rory Kinnear. He's a brilliant actor, I find.
Yeah.
He's, really good.
He's had so many wonderful parts as the years have gone on. So many things you see him in, and so many things you've seen him in before this. Like, he's almost unrecognizable as the creature in this show. But Rory Kinnear's been in loads of James Bond movies. Has been in the wonderful show Years and Years in 2019. He's just one of those characters that are one of those character actors that appears in so many things. But this is almost iconic as a role. For him, the seasons he spent on this show. Let's get into our big moments for episode 3. John, do you want to kick us off with your big moment for the episode?
Yeah, and speaking of Years and Years, although not the TV show, the band, it is Ollie Alexander who plays Mr. Fenton. Again, I'm underestimating how much I love this character played by Ollie Alexander. There's something just captivating in terms of that pale face that happens right at the end of the episode, emerging from the darkness of Malcolm Murray's cellar to kind of herald the arrival of his master as he sort of speaks to the darkness. It's just a great bit of filming, and I really like how it's played, because with the arrival of Mr. Fenton as a prisoner chained up in the cellar, he basically inserts doubt into this company. He sows division and disruption amongst the group because of the violence expressed towards him by Malcolm. Like, we just have this uncompromising sort of beat down of him by Malcolm Murray. And again, it's something that's uncomfortable to watch. I think that's one of the great things about this series in terms of language, in terms of sexuality, in terms of all these. They really do not shy away from any of it. They allow it to speak for itself, because it is a part of the world. And it's really uncomfortable to watch. I do like the fact that Fenton does lick up his own blood that is flowing from his mouth from this beat down. I've kind of put, don't waste a drop, you know, this kind of, can't waste it, which is good. Kids, remember, always clear your plate.
Recycle?
No, always clean your plate. Always eat up those greens. And I love this, and the uncomfortableness here is, you know, it's projected through Ethan, who questions really, you know, what are we doing? It's torture, and then this idea that they're going to experiment on him as well. But just going back a bit as well, I've probably gone slightly too far in time. You know, he's captured at London Zoo, where because of Vanessa's kind of connection with Mina, she's the sounds there, and she connects it with London Zoo. Fenton has decimated the monkey population, it would seem, chewing on the poor monkeys in London Zoo, but that's where he's captured.
He has exotic tastes.
Well, absolutely. And he's just, yeah, he is a servant to his master, and his master has effectively got him inserted as this mole into Malcolm Murray's house. And I think that's really, really nice. I think there's, in any case, you know, when they're in London Zoo, they all have this feeling that something's not right. Certainly Vanessa, she kind of connects in with that. And again, there needs to be a compact formed here as they move forward because of, I suppose, the aggressiveness in which they're treating Mr. Fenton. And, you know, one by one, they all kind of nod to Malcolm as he suggests, you know, we have to move forward as one if we are to move forward. But Ethan doesn't really connect in with that group, but he just he kind of looks at Vanessa and says, I'm with you, which is a really interesting distinction, for this character. And Vanessa, though, is the one that kind of drives this idea that she is happy with what's happening to Mr. Fenton, as well, and sort of propels Malcolm to this idea of making sure everyone else is happy with it in a sense, or agrees to it. But then, after Ethan has come on board, you know, she does turn to Malcolm, and in front of everyone kind of calls him out for maybe slight, duplicitous, underhand nature, because, this idea that maybe Mina, really is tricking, Vanessa here, that he thought something wasn't right. And I liked that a lot because this kind of, the group doesn't splinter, but there's clear divisions, of those who will kind of act on Malcolm Murray, and his word. And then there's Ethan, you know, as the American, as the outsider, he has this different take. And I thought this was all really, really fascinating. And I just think the way Ollie Alexander plays Mr. Fenton, because he's the driver on this, really you know, you just completely buy into it. I mean, I think his turn of phrase, I love the fact, that he goes, well, I know the name Vanessa. So he knows about Vanessa Ives, and everyone's, why, how is that? You know, again, he's troubling. He upsets the apple cart here, and that is really good.
I think another character, the youthfulness of Fenton. It's another interesting thing about him. He's supposed to be kind of the street urchin on the streets of the Victorian era, and he's been brought in to be this monster effectively. So there's almost that point where the rest of the characters want to save him from this affliction that he has, because he is such a young kid effectively, but he's actually got a violent tongue on him, and he's got a violent reaction to everything that's going on. He doesn't want to be saved from this. He knows he's now immortal. He knows he now has this power in him that none of them have. And I love how he plays it. He's such a fascinating kid on screen.
Yeah, I think if you eat monkeys, I think it's pretty hard to to save that person. Really good performance by Ollie Alexander as well, and a point of interest for his character Fenton, because again it pricked my ears, because again that's just like one step closer to the big bad Dracula. So it's alluding to that again, because he's very much featured in obviously Bram Stoker's Dracula and in prior movies. Very interesting to see him in here. And the dynamics with the team, it starts to you start to see where people are forming their, I guess, alliances with. I find it very interesting that Ethan and Vanessa, Ethan's kind of drawn to her, I think maybe because she's the one that kind of recruited him. There's something there, and that's just the start of, we'll see it later on in the episodes, but there is a dynamic between the two. I mean, we saw it with with Vanessa telling him about the demi-monde as well. So, there's just something there that I found quite interesting, how he sides with her, although what you're saying as well, she may have been influenced by Mina. She's actually promoting this sort of behavior towards Fenton. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that moment around the fireplace where they kind of form this compact. In, I think Malcolm says it's not for the weak or for the kind. But you have a bit of a standoff between Victor and Ethan as well. Ethan kind of this hustler, sort of very confident, this gunslinger, and Victor being this sort of almost sensitive poet and scientist. But Malcolm again says, it's surprising to see you suddenly averse to violence to Ethan, and Victor just says that's because it's not towards the Indians in North America. And he has a really interesting line that, yes, you pacified the Red Indians to extinction. It's just that kind of whole notion. And so Ethan has this issue with Fenton, but again, it's his dark past. And maybe it's because he has kind of moved on, regrets, has this regret around what's happened, but also then the suggestion that he is somehow involved with these brutal sort of murders that are happening across London as well, and certainly with what happens in London Zoo, with his moment with that lead wolf. I presume it's a wolf. Yeah. It is really good to suggest there's a bit of lycanthrope within him, dare I say it.
He could Spoilers. He could be part Aussie as well. I mean, I got a very Crocodile Dundee vibe with him just doing the taking down the water buffalo.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He's just well trained with animals, John. That's all.
He's a dog whisperer, a dog handler.
There you go.
Wookiees.
Overall, that's it for Fenton?
Yes, it is. But I think just my final part on this is, I really wanted to add Mr. Lyle as well, because I think the supporting cast here, they all have their moment. And I think none more so than Fenton. He's in 2 episodes and I absolutely adore this character. And I've never really been drawn to the character in the other movies or anything like that. There's something that's pulled out here. The creepiness that, Ollie Alexander plays him, is so good. And again, as I say, it's another enduring image from the show for me, is his pale face in the darkness calling out to his master. And again, I don't want to say iconic. I've already used that for Séance, but for me, it's just so good. and I kind of get drawn into that. It's with music, with the imagery of it.
Yeah.
I think that's a big player for me. I don't know whether I'm one of these people that literally does not judge a book by its cover, but I buy a book because of its cover. I'm kind of like attracted towards that kind of thing. And here, the Dervla, in terms of what John Logan have done with the writing, that they've produced this character that is both a nod to the original book, but they feel to me as though they've just brought him on so much more as to how he inserts himself into this show for 2 episodes and that disruptive element to this group. It's really good.
Absolutely. Ray, you're going to talk about another new character in your big moment.
Yeah, I thought I was really taken with Vincent Brand. I thought he was really he brought a lot of warmth to this episode. Much of this episode was about the journey of the creature. I just want to call it out now, one of the big scenes that I really enjoyed was the birth of the creature. It was horrific. Just screaming, blood covered, reaching out towards Victor. It was really a terrifying kind of scene. And I thought, again, brilliantly done, brilliantly shot. But we see a lot of struggles that the creature, he is basically abandoned, but he is taken under the wing of Vincent Brand, who, doesn't mind a little tipple himself. He doesn't care about appearances, and there's just something warming about him not discriminating at all. This individual, and so he gives the creature a purpose and gives him a home, and I thought he was a very interesting character. I'm glad that there's more to him. We see in the subsequent episodes as well. But the big moment was this turn of face of the creature, who could have easily gone down the path of a murderous, bloodthirsty monster, but he's actually turned around and is quite industrious, working in the theatre.
Absolutely, yeah.
What does he say? He says, I discovered kindness and found a home. It is a really nice moment. I think the other thing that touched me on this was where, as you say, Ray, where Vincent says, he takes him in, but he says, this is a place where the malformed find a place, where the different can take flight. It is the theatre. I think personally, I find that quite important. I think, in terms of the diversity in the arts, and I think it also connects with Mr. Lyle in the sciences as well, that his eccentricity, his flamboyancy, probably wouldn't be tolerated down the mine or in the steel furnace or in the cotton mill, but it is where they can thrive in that time as people of whatever Vincent says malformed or of different persuasions, and that is and in terms of that kindness element. And it's also nice that the show provides that, I think, as well, the light-hearted moments, because otherwise we get a lot of blood. It keeps the balance to the show.
Absolutely.
I think that's a very important line as well, because with it he just assuages anything that the creature may have feared or may have doubts with, and it's just such a comforting thing to say, I find, so again it just shows Vincent Brand to be just basically a really good dude, and I really like that. So
it's just that instantly welcoming type of character that he is, and I think it's really important because, again, remember, these are all love letters to Penny Dreadfuls, and the simple nature of the Penny Dreadful is 3 pages in you meet the monster, and then by the end the monster is defeated. That's kind of the central premise of it. Here we're introduced to the creature in such a violent way in episode 2, and we hear his backstory here and how he's been created. And to have that moment where somebody looks at him and isn't seeing him as a creature for the first time, because he's not going to judge him, is a really important facet of the show overall. You know, this idea that you can't just look at somebody and go, they're that type of person. That's the type of thing they are. You know, if you think about one of the biggest monsters in the show really is Dorian Gray, as we said before. And he's got a beautiful look to him, as opposed to someone like the creature who has got a beautiful mind hidden behind this, visage that was given to him by Victor Frankenstein, basically. Sewed together and he was stuck with it, kind of thing. That kind of leads me on to my big moment really for the episode, because I'm also going to cross over a little bit with your point, Ray, because I think the history of this character, the creature, who is not named as of yet, a very big point for him really is that Proteus, the other version of the reanimated man that the Victor Frankenstein created, was named very quickly, chose his own name for himself, whereas the creature is left being the creature. I love the battle of wills between these two characters as well, as each one of them calls each other demon. I love that they choose the same term to describe each other, you know, and it's just all about perception for each one of them. And understandably, the perception of the creature to Frankenstein is that he is a total monster, because not only was he brought back to life without asking for it, he was left alone because he was scared and screaming in the lab and scared off Victor Frankenstein, who left and moved to London, left him behind in his lab, locked the door behind him and ran off to London, you know? This person that wasn't allowed to have any moments of explanation as to what he was doing there is just left alone with a pile of poetry books, a bed, and that's it. And he had to learn to see who he was. He used as he said, the window to the world, in the room to see what was going on outside until he felt comfortable enough to leave and comfortable enough to create his own persona. And I think that juxtaposition within his language and his tone as to the way that he's created is such a great character, I suppose, the way he's able to match Victor Frankenstein in terms of the language he uses and the poetry he uses, because he spent time studying the things that Victor Frankenstein was in love with. He seemed to be hopeful that he was going to impress his creator when he eventually met him, until he realized he was being left alone by this awful, awful man, basically. So, so that's where he's developed as a character. And I think it's a really great take, on the creature, on the monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think with that interaction between Victor and the creature, you still get behind the creature even after what we saw in episode 2, what he did to Proteus. It's a very fascinating thing that we actually turn around, and I wouldn't say rooting for him, but he was making very compelling points to Victor.
Absolutely.
And it paints a really bad picture on Victor as well, like what he did, basically abandoning. Like, how would you feel if you entered the world and the first thing you saw was someone running away and you being abandoned? He said something along those lines.
Yeah.
Well, you think about it, like, you know, the birth of a child. Most children, as they come out and enter the world, the first thing they may do is cry. If you are most people and you're having your first child, the cry of a baby is not the most wonderful thing in the world, right? So, would you run away and leave the baby behind as it's just entered into the world? Not many people would. You know, Victor chose this. Victor was the one that created this reanimated man, and then ran off and left him because he came into the world screaming, "Oh no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to have someone I could talk poetry with." You know, probably not the best way, but it is interesting.
It is the notion of, you know, families and that you come together. It's, you know, it's the pride of lions, the pack of wolves, the human family in a sense. But it's also that there are people that don't have that. And you see it in nature. That I think, what was I watching recently where, you know, a bird that's like, I don't recognize you as my chick if you're not on the nest, or something like that. With this, though, it's probably just, what have I created? It's that abomination. But I like that motivation is, the monster says, you know, my first experience was to experience rejection from my creator, effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought that was really good. I really like the fact as well that, as you were saying, they both are calling one another demon, and obviously, you know, who is more demonic, the monster or the person that created the monster, in that sense. But I like the fact that Vincent names him Caliban, from Shakespeare, which is a really nice moment. You know, the person that gives him and discovers kindness, or allows the monster to discover kindness, gives him a new name, which is nice, as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wonder, moving forward, do we call him Caliban, the monster, demon? So any one of those three, I reckon, is good to go.
Caliban's definitely more polite. Yeah. But while I do side with him in this argument with Victor Frankenstein, there is also a sinister side to him that we can't ignore. There is that moment when they're having that discussion, between the two of them, and the creature has realized his nature, I suppose. He realizes that immortals are the future because everybody else dies and they don't. People like him, people who are created and don't die. I love that he compares himself to the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. He says, people like me are steam engines and modernity coming in to flatten the rest of you, effectively. So we will outlive everybody else. And that's why he makes his request. That's why he makes the request for somebody else immortal, a bride of Frankenstein that can live through the life with him and will be a companion to him, because everybody else is going to die and he can't live eternally without a companion. I just think it's a really good positioning of that central part of the Frankenstein mythology, I guess you call it.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I love how he phrases it as well. You know, again, it comes back to the dialogue in this show, where he goes, you know, I am modernity personified, not the antique pastoral age. And I really like that because, you know, Victor is a scientist, but he's also a romantic poet. Caliban absolutely goes with, I am modernity. I am the Industrial Revolution. I am the scientific revolution that will move you to one side. And I think that's really important in this period. And it's kind of why I like this show. It's why I like sort of books from this period, because of the social upheaval and change from the Industrial Revolution, urbanization, all this kind of stuff. But also within science, you know, you had that moment where the arts and sciences were connected. It was Vickers studying the universe through their telescopes, or it was doing anatomy. And that's gradually split, where you have these two distinct groups. There's a book called Two Cultures about this, which is fascinating. And it's Caliban has made his choice. I am modernity. I am science. I am industrial. Victor is almost still of that time where he could conceivably be a poet as much as a scientist, or a vicar in, you know, the parish church doing experiments. And I find that really interesting here. And I like how he's so confident of his place in this new world as the demon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that dichotomy between Victor as the poet and the monster as modernity. I didn't pick that up, but I love it. And I like how, as you mentioned, Derek, he sees himself as the steam engine and you know, part of the modern age. It really does give it a nice little spin to it. What you were mentioning, Derek, about the bride and how Caliban is not totally, you know, benevolent as well. I find it's something from the book, but it's obviously translated over here as well, in the fact that he's so alone, right? So you can still sympathize with him because he's an immortal. He needs someone, but he is in effect asking Victor to curse someone to live that terrible life as well. Previously, what I mentioned about Dorian Gray in the previous episode, about him just being kind of self-absorbed and not really caring about the other person's feelings. It's kind of like that here with Caliban. Although in this instance, you can relate to him, because if he's going to be wandering the earth like Melmoth, you know, just for centuries, he'd want a company. He want a companion. Absolutely. So very, very complex character. And again, testament to Shelley's brilliant story.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, a massively complex character based on something that, you know, what's our image of Frankenstein? You know, the bolts in the neck, rar, 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 I'm going to kill the villagers, is basically all we have from, you know, Scooby-Doo all the way through to the movie versions of this character. It's the monster has never been someone that you would sit down and say, have a poetic discourse with about the future and the past and science and modernity. You know, I love how they've twisted that once again for this show. Really good. Yeah, that's my big point for this episode. Any notes left?
Absolutely. Just further to that last point as well, with the creature, Frankenstein's monster, reference to Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein with Robert De Niro. That was I found a very great, or intriguing depiction of the monster by De Niro. For me, a lot more terrifying than Caliban here currently.
Yeah.
But still had the same sort of sympathy, with his plight, I guess. Sticking with Caliban, one of the quotes from the episode was very reminiscent to me of Shelley's novel. He says to Victor, "You have not known horror until I've shown it to you." A very deep threat, I think, as well.
Yeah,
and that reminded me of this beautiful quote from the novel. "I have love in me, the likes of which you can scarcely imagine, and rage, the likes of which you would not believe. If I cannot satisfy the one, I will indulge the other." Just beautiful writing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also just to sort of continue that, I think, Ray, as well, there's a really nice line from Victor. He goes, "If you seek to threaten me with life." This idea that he would embrace death, in a sense. And I think one of my notes is, I think the young Victor, obsessed by death is probably not right, but just influenced by death from Bradshaw, his dog. And I like the way they walk through the daffodils again, another little nod to Wordsworth.
Yeah.
And then coming across the maggot-ridden Bradshaw. Yeah. And then his mother, who coughs a hell of a load of blood up onto the young Victor. I think that would probably destroy my life as well. I'd probably kind of, whether I'd go the same way, but yeah, again, another load of blood in the face from his mother.
I know it's a weird thing to point out, but the next scene for him to be wearing a white shirt after that, I thought he'd probably choose something different.
Yeah, a red shirt, maybe.
I never ever want to wear a white shirt again after that moment.
And the Grand Guignol Theatre that Caliban finds as his home from Vincent is reference, I think, to the theatre of the same name in Paris, which was very well known for graphic and amoral horror shows.
Right.
It was something that Vincent Brand says. He goes, "Oh, it's all Ibsen now, like the Cherry Orchard and so on." Whereas he then starts talking about Shakespeare, which has got Titus Andronicus, which I think when my mum went to see it at the Globe in London, it used the most amount of blood ever on a theatre production because it's so violent. I like the fact that he's saying all this kind of new fluffy stuff where you've got the raw Shakespearean sort of horror, sex, fear, death, all this, and he brings this together in this, what maybe the rest of society thinks as this amoral horror show at the Grand Guignol Theatre. And that kind of, I think, explains why in episode 4 you have Vanessa, Dorian, and Ethan in there. It's not the polite theatre company that you think. This is something much more raucous, much more kind of visceral,
for everybody.
I think. Yeah, exactly. It's the equivalent of the midnight showing at the cinema to the crappy film. Like, I don't know, Children of the Corn 4.
The Urban Harvest.
It is one of my favorites because it's so awful.
Excellent. Any other notes on the episode, guys?
Just one final thing from me as well is that, we do learn here that the creature we see, because Malcolm Murray says, wants you, not Mina, to Vanessa. So again, it's this idea that maybe, that Mina is this false trail. Right. That duplicitousness of Malcolm, that he's kind of thinking it's not about his daughter. It could be about Vanessa. And I think we get a bit more of that from the next episode that we'll be looking at.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Excellent. That's it for our discussion on episode 3 of Penny Dreadful. Again, if you want to send in your thoughts to us about any of the episodes that we're talking about on Penny Dreadful, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries. We'd love to hear your thoughts for the next section or any of the episodes of Penny Dreadful. Another quick break and we'll be back with our final part of this section of Penny Dreadful, episode 4, Demi-Monde.
I am Connor from the House of L.
And I am Ray from the House of Zod.
We are two of the many, many survivors of Krypton's destruction, and we have made our home in Australia, and dare I say, have become Australians, for better or worse. But we have also decided to read Superman comics, read Superman books, watch Superman shows, cartoons, movies, basically everything Superman, and from an Australian perspective as well. Whether you're a seasoned fan, like me,
or whether you are coming in fresh, wide-eyed and wanting to learn more like me, then this podcast is for you. Join us for our bi-weekly adventures available on all good podcast catchers.
So just search for Last Sons of Krypton, a Superman podcast. We'll be coming to you from Australia or some cosmic dimension, wherever we are that week.
Up, and away.
Welcome back, Penny Faithful, to our discussions about Penny Dreadful, Season 1, Episode 4, Demi-Monde. I'm one of your hosts, Derek, and I'm here with my dreadful co-hosts.
Why, thank you, sir. Yes, I am here, one of your other hosts, John.
And I am here. My name is Ray, and I'm looking forward to this episode 4, Demi-Monde.
Excellent. Sorry for calling you guys dreadful co-hosts.
That's fine.
Hey, look, it works.
You're a dreadful co-host.
I am also a dreadful co-host.
We're all dreadful.
Exactly. Let's get straight into our discussion about episode 4, Demi-Monde. Once again, directed by Dervla Walsh and written by showrunner John Logan. Once again, I like how they're keeping the group together on this show. You know, it seems like a show that is born out of one person's vision, I suppose. So nice to have the same kind of people involved in each of the episodes.
Yeah, maybe they'll become like the Rolling Stones, where in 90 years' time, it will be Dervla and John Logan still doing TV together.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will find out in a couple of months' time when Penny Dreadful City of Angels comes out in April. We'll find out whether Dervla's back involved in that.
Exactly.
Show. Yeah, it'd be kind of cool. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for this episode of Penny Dreadful?
Sure. Frankenstein consults a hematologist, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, who finds the blood contains a unique property that prevents complete coagulation. Mm-hmm. He believes it assists in the eating of blood. Frankenstein begins experimenting on Fenton, the vampire they caught and are keeping in chains. Frankenstein is also having to deal with his creature, who wants him to create a female companion for him. Chandler takes Brona to the Grand Guignol Theatre. Gray is there, as is Vanessa, but it's Chandler he is interested in. Oh yeah.
Another great episode here. One of the things that I love in supernatural stories is vampires. It's one of the things I've always loved reading stories about. And what I always love is when they get to the point of explaining their version of vampires, because vampires have some very basic ties between them over the years. Some very basic ideas. They eat blood, basically, is the idea that keeps them alive. Some people have explained why it keeps them alive. I'm a massive fan of Anne Rice's vampire novels, so her exploration through history with vampires is always really good. I'm also a massive fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I love their version of vampires as well. And what I love in this show is I love that they've come up with a scientific method to explain why vampires are being kept alive, eating blood. I think that's a really interesting concept that's come into this episode.
Yeah, it's another little tick in the box for reference to Bram Stoker's Dracula with Van Helsing. And I like how, because Dracula is, for all intents, one of the biggest classical monsters there is, and he takes a peripheral kind of position in this whole story, Penny Dreadful, and I love how they just kind of skirt around Dracula. Like we had Fenton calling out to his master in the previous episodes. And now we've got Van Helsing, who's the vampire hunter, knowing all this stuff about vampires. And I love how, like, we don't touch upon Dracula himself, you know, because I think in some ways, I don't know, it might cheapen it by having him just out there makes him such a bigger, like, a force. And so, so definitely I'm happy to see Van Helsing, and I love this explanation about vampires as well.
Yeah. I do like that moment with Van Helsing where, again, you don't get much of the explanation of who he is. You know who he is just peripherally because you know about the stories of Dracula. And I love that moment where you have Victor Frankenstein going, you must have a lot of knowledge about blood, being a hematologist. And he just goes, intimately. And that's the only little allusion that you get to who this person is and how involved he has been in this exploration over the years. So quite cool.
Yeah, and even just that he says about Malcolm, he doesn't know what he seeks as well, you know, in that sense, which is really good. I do like the fact that his method for discovering the stain that reveals the anticoagulant properties is called Hannah's wink. I thought that was quite cute of him, for sure. It's his wife, Hannah.
Yes.
Although I don't really know too much about Van Helsing, other than he is a vampire hunter, and that Wolverine did play him in a movie, as well, which again I quite liked, even though I don't think it was that great. But anyway, enough of my cinematic tastes, which are pretty poor.
You've seen great movies and you loved great movies, but you've also seen terrible movies and loved terrible movies. So it's not. Exactly. Just don't focus on all the terrible movies because it will make it sound bad. Let's get into our big moments from episode 4. Once again, John, do you want to kick us off with the biggest moment from the episode?
Well, yes, exactly. The pleasures of the flesh, Dorian Gray's orgy, and more, of course, because I do like the fact that we get to glimpse behind the portrait into his hidden kind of little area as well, with the hidden painting, which we all kind of know, but we don't see what's on it. We don't get to glimpse into the hideousness potentially that could be his aging portrait. But we certainly see that he's sat there looking at maybe a truer reflection of himself. After his huge orgy. And I think it comes very much, it helps with the character here. You know, he meets Vanessa at the botanical gardens and talks about the deceptiveness of plants, this idea of beauty to entrap you, and the deadliness, even though I've written in my notes deadlines for some reason. I don't know. And the deadliness of these beautiful plants with their flowers. You know, he talks about the permanence of art, the music being ephemeral. And, you know, it's one of those things I think where, you know, even though he is bored with things, as we've been talking about before, and he must move on to the next new thing, within himself, he's trying to keep within a certain moment of himself, by, you know, keeping his physical appearance youthful. He doesn't want to move on from that. Yet with everything else, he wants the next best thing, and I really like that kind of dichotomy at the heart of Dorian Gray. This need for the new, the excessive, the more, and yet within himself, he's wanting to freeze time, to keep that beautiful appearance.
But he also realizes that's the key to, I suppose, the locks that are put in place for him. This is the thing he must keep going, is this ability he has to enter any room and get whatever he wants. You know, that's this kind of realization. John mentioned back when we discussed episode 3 that I called him a hipster. This is the episode where I called him a hipster, because he has that moment where he goes, oh, all that music. I know every groove of every single cylinder. Oh, can nobody make anything new anymore? It just sounds like every hipster I've ever met. So.
But he does have that moment, except for one, and I suppose this leads to my ultimate point, and that is sort of him and Ethan Chandler running. Well, I don't think they do run. They walk fast through, you know, in his hall that is adorned with all the pictures. You know, I'm not going to lie, this is just a personal moment of sheer joy from this episode where, with the Liebestod or Love Death of Tristan and Isolde playing from Wagner after the theatre and the less than happy ending with Brona, the blood sports, the fight, being dumped high as a kite probably on absinthe and Dorian Gray's excessive amount of cologne that he has, that effectively they have a good old fashioned makeout with all this going on. So I really like that. And of course with it is ultimately that Wagner's Love Death just playing in the background is awesome because it is that piece of music that at the time Wagner introduced the themes in a sense. It is the idea that you hear the waves crashing on the beach here in terms of the drum rolls and the violins, and he very much sort of brought a very thematic approach, I think, to music in this time compared to Baroque and all this from previous. So it's this modern thing, it's this new thing that again Dorian's connecting on. I like when all these different memories play through Ethan's head as well, because there is one with the actress from the Grand Guignol Theatre where she's just been attacked by the beast. And there's blood spurting out, but she's reclining it. She looks like that grand operatic singer, sort of doing the high pitch, the long note, but she's got blood just pumping out of her, as Caliban below is kind of utilizing the pump to this visual effect in the theatre. And I love that. I just thought it was, really, it was just such purely a emotional scene, I thought. And I love everything just worked in harmony for me in terms of the flashbacks, the music, and obviously Dorian Gray and Ethan Chandler getting it on.
I've got to jump in there, John, with, and it makes me smile with how you're describing, it making you feel like seeing the images and the music as well, because I see a direct correlation between the images and the actual musicality of Wagner and Liebestod. So, just a really quick crash course, class 101 of Wagner, Liebestod as well. The way he wrote it, he was heavily into chromaticism, which had no, no home key, no major and minor for those that do know music. And Liebestod was famous for being like very erotic music, because what he would do would be that he would leave chords unresolved. So you get this moment of tension, and he creates tension by doing that. And so he'd never come down to any particular home key. He'd just leave it hanging up there. And what we see with the images of Ethan Chandler, with him, just reflecting on all these things that have happened, it's almost like a build-up for him as well. And it just culminates at the end, and there's this moment in the music where everything kind of explodes, kind of figuratively. And to him, he gets this realization as well. And that's when he kind of goes up to Dorian Gray, grabs him round the neck, and then he just, they just make out. And I think I loved that scene because it was so, I thought, well thought out with the music. It was so appropriate. Absolutely. Yeah, it was really good.
Absolutely. And I think they use even the simple fact of it being love and death, the fact that these aren't just sensual images that are going on and being cultivated by the music in Ethan's mind. It is the violence that's gone on. We get another glimpse of some of the murders that have taken place that are flashing in Ethan's mind, something that hasn't actually been connected in the show so far, but Ethan is having flashes of the murders that have happened in previous episodes. He's seeing the blood, he's seeing the death, he's also seeing the love of Brona, he's also seeing some situations that may have pointed towards love. So I really do like how that's all put together as the two of them couple. It's fascinating, really well put together.
It's really good. I think, I remember first hearing the Love Death, and I was just like, it was nothing I'd ever heard before, and it was really incredible. And just how it sort of conjures up, sort of images in a sense. I think the only other kind of composer I've had that with probably is Sibelius, the Finnish composer. He has a violin concerto, and it just, you get the sense of the forests of Finland from it. It's really incredible. Right. And I think here, this sort of, tragic, hopeless love, that is kind of brought out in the love death of Tristan and Isolde, Romeo and Juliet, whatever it might be. And in a sense, Ethan has just had that with Brona. So it connects back to that. I won't go into too much because I do know that that's possibly someone else's big moment of the episode. So yeah, it's really good. But I love, the way the music's done. And I think you even just feel that with the composer for the series as well. Yes. How he, because Dorian Gray's kind of theme is really nice in this, as is Victor's, as is the overall theme. It's really nicely done.
Absolutely. He knows his music.
And also as well, I mean, Tristan and Isolde, I think was written around the 1860s as well. So that puts it right close, quite recent. So when Dorian thinks about it, and it's in his collection of cylinders, it's relatively new music then. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I suppose, created in cylinders for bringing home to your own house rather than having to go out to theatre to see it. He can take it home and play it at home. So, that would have been definitely relatively new.
What's the term for people that sort of adopt the new technology? Because he's with the photographs and the gramophone. He's an early adopter.
There you go.
Shall we say?
He'd be an Apple fan nowadays.
Yeah, exactly.
I am started to feel a little bit like Brona in this conversation. You guys with your pretty words about classical music that I know nothing about. Let's move on to the second big point for the episode, Ray.
Yeah, for me, the big moment for this episode was all the characters going to the theatre and watching, kind of through the eyes of Brona and Ethan. I mean, I just loved how she was so excited about it, but at the same moment, it just filled me with dread, because when someone's that happy and everything's so good, something's got to happen.
Absolutely.
And we do see it happen later on. But, I thought this was very cool because you get to see Caliban working earnestly behind the scenes, he's just doing his job. And then slowly Dorian Gray's up there. You got Vanessa, Ethan and Brona are there, of course. And Semembe is there, apparently. They make mention of that as well. So, so you have nearly the whole cast there. And I found that just as a pinch point for the series and the ensemble to come together in one scene, was quite memorable. But also as well, again, another little hint there with the performance on stage with a full moon and the werewolf. Things are coming. So, very interesting.
You're expecting a little nudge from Ethan going, do you like the story? Is this a story that you really enjoy, Brona?
Yeah, exactly.
Really good. Yeah, I love the excitement of Billie Piper when she's watching this play. It's fascinating because, she is a hard person. It's something that we've said early on in the earlier episodes. She's a hard character. She doesn't let much penetrate her skin, or at least tries not to show it. Whereas here it's moments of pure joy where she's not realizing, the kind of effects that they're putting on stage in front of her, the things that she can't possibly fathom how they were created, because it's the first time she's ever seen it being done. To be absolutely honest, we're over 140 years since this would have taken place. And if I went to a theatre and saw this amount of work being put into the production, I'd be pretty satisfied with that night out, right? For 20 or 30 quid. That seems like a really good night out.
Yeah. Healthy snacks, a nice orange. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And just the amount of blood that's being used, by Caliban when he's below stage, just consistently pumping that blood over the body of the murdered girl for what seems like about 10 minutes after the play is finished.
Yeah, I love seeing Caliban working all the different things, from the blood pump to the false doors on the stage. There was that moment where it was, rubbing your stomach, patting your head kind of thing, where he's working two, going in opposite directions. I think I'd have a bit too much pressure on that. I'd probably keep the werewolf down and the guy, or I'd be like all over the place. But I really liked, seeing all the stagehand work behind. I thought it was really, really cool.
Yeah. Isn't there even that moment from when Vincent arrives back down, after doing his moment on stage, and he's like, "Oh, this play is so bad on my knees," as he's running up and down off stage.
I loved it because you did see joy in Caliban as well. Well, I remember while he's pumping the blood, he's just having the time of his life, and so you do see another side of him.
And Vincent's having a drink as well, isn't he? As well,
I think so.
They're kind of laughing away. That's really good.
There's one little blink and you'll miss it moment with the actor who plays the werewolf. I don't know whether you guys saw it, as he sees Caliban working his magic backstage. Before he puts on his mask, revealing he's the monster going on stage, there's a look that he gives to Caliban as if you don't belong here. It's a really interesting, tiny little moment from an extra that really plays into this character of Caliban, where he knows not everybody is as welcoming to him as Vincent is about the theatre. There are some people that don't like having someone like him around. So I did like that little tiny touch that was in there. Yeah,
just a little reminder that, his world isn't perfect, and he's still got this massive kind of, weight on his shoulders.
And another great skill from the showrunners, you mentioned, Ray, about having this amount of the cast in one location. But I kind of like that not all of them interact with each other and not all of them need to. Yeah. And if they do, it's only a very small conversation. It's not something massively important to the storyline that every one of these characters have to be in this location. It's not like a big ticking clock, a big bomb going off or something like that. Semembe seems to be there just specifically because Vanessa is there and he needs to protect her. He has that feeling that he needs to make sure that she's safe. But he doesn't get any moment where he says that, or doesn't get any moment where anybody's told that. He's just simply seen on screen for a quick moment as the camera passes by where he's standing, but he's constantly watching over her rather than the play. So some just really interesting moments. And I mentioned it already, my favorite moment with Brona, because there are moments in all of our lives when we're surrounded by people who either know each other or have a certain way of talking, and Brona just looks at them all and goes, "Oh, you all with your fancy words, I'm out of here." Because she kind of realizes that no matter how much Ethan loves and respects her, no matter how much he wants to be with her, she will never fit into their world, or at least her perceived version of their world. She'll never have a place there. So she walks away from that table before even getting an invite.
There's a lot of weight with that scene as well. Not only just that awkwardness of Brona and amongst the others, but the relationships between them all. I mean, they're all intermingled, and that just kind of actually made it even worse for Brona. And I think that's probably what set her off, to trigger off her insecurities, especially from her interaction with Dorian and her current interaction with Ethan. And as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, it kind of goes pear-shaped, and she kind of self-destructs in that she pushes Ethan away, because she feels, I guess, filthy at having bumped into Dorian, and then actually having seen Ethan interact with Vanessa, who's from high society. Very interesting scene.
It's kind of like she has a reactive epiphany, ultimately, that this sense of being out of place, an immigrant in the big smoke in London, the fine words, the different subject matter, and that idea of her feeling inadequate. But then with the consumption, even she knows that she is about to die.
Well,
that she is realizing, as, dare I say it, the allegory for Isolde, that there is a death here, even though she loves him. And for her, it is to kind of break that up. She doesn't want that thing. So it's really, it's a great little scene between all those. I think it's really clever.
Absolutely. And just, that moment of meeting the person that just treated her as something that is destined to die, despite, Ethan's assertion that he will spend every moment with her until that happens. She has just met that character that has treated her as the only thing important about you, or the only thing interesting about you is that you're almost dead.
Yeah.
It's a really great moment, but a really hard moment with Brona. So maybe next episode she'll have a nice moment that isn't punctuated by death and horror. Probably not, though, unfortunately. My big moment about the episode, I really just wanted to talk about some big story beat that happens connected with Fenton. We talked a lot about Fenton last episode, so I'm not going to go into him too much. But I kind of like this idea that the group of Malcolm and Simbene, Victor and Ethan are trying to treat Fenton to take away his vampiric ways, using the basis of the investigation that's been done by Van Helsing. And just that turn in him as Vanessa arrives with, thinking that he's cured, it's just this kid sitting on the floor and she tries to roll him an apple across the dirty floor. Not very nice of her, but his response to her going, "Oh, I just want bats and rats and blood, you whore," to this character that he thinks is trying to help him out, and Victor's response to him just going, "Oh, well, it's a process. He's not expected to be cured immediately, is he?" Really interesting that they do this, because this is the central part that we learn as the episode goes on. Sir Malcolm does now believe potentially that Mina has been taken and has been turned into a vampire like Fenton. It doesn't allow him to show much restraint in his treatment of Fenton, but he is definitely going to use Fenton to experiment on to see potentially if he gets Mina back, he may have to cure her. So why not use this street urchin that he has no caring about to try and test these methods before he gets Mina back?
Definitely. I mean, I love Malcolm's kind of when he says his chatter is becoming wearisome, and just his face, because he's obsessed about Vanessa. Where's Vanessa? He does have a good line directed at Malcolm as well. Whether I can say it on the podcast, but he goes, "F you all, especially you," and he says "toff wanker," to Malcolm Murray, and I do, like, that expression indeed. Instead of a posh wanker, I suppose, but it's really nicely done. But of course, he does do his master's bidding as well, which is a nice point.
Exactly. Before you take it. With Fenton as well, one of the other things I like in this episode is you kind of got that thinking, I suppose, that maybe they were trying to set it up that he may have been going mad and seeing his master in front of him. But I kind of like the reveal that he was actually seeing his master. His master has infiltrated Sir Malcolm's home easily, It's not this old thing of having to be invited in through the door to break in through your enemy's house, which always seemed like a bit of a story protection for the characters. It never felt like a real thing that you could say a monster can't be invited inside your home and then you're protected. Sorry, love, you've got windows. You might leave one open. So I do love this moment as Fenton sees his master in front of him and then bites through his own wrists to get out of his binds so he can follow his master to Vanessa's room, where they think Vanessa might be because she hasn't come on to visit Fenton. So these moments of the reveal that the master is inside the home, and I think you mentioned it actually last episode, John, this is the real reveal that the master is after Vanessa, not after Mina. He already has Mina, and Mina is now just the conduit and the way to get to Vanessa. It's quite a big moment, really, that not only is it revealed to us, the audience, but it's also revealed to us that Malcolm knew that. Malcolm knew that potentially Mina was just being used to get Vanessa out of hiding. And actually, Malcolm's probably likely to hand over Vanessa in exchange for Mina. It's quite a big thing for these characters who we think are quite associated with each other. Yeah, it's an important thought. I mean, they have a very strange relationship as well. There's that one bit, I can't believe if it is in this episode as well, where Malcolm says to Vanessa, "You're the nasty and cruel daughter that I should have had." That I deserved. And it was, and so they both kind of go at each other with, Mina is the central point for them as well, but knowing now that Sir Malcolm kind of knows the end game for Vanessa makes him out to be a little bit more sinister than we originally think, he's not perfect, but this is just even worse, so. Exactly. Yeah. And we also find out a bit more about his view of Ethan Chandler as well. There is that nice moment, where Malcolm is also suggesting that Victor is kind of
the son that he would want. You know, this idea that he would peel away the skin to look inside, as we saw from episode 1 when he gives him the vampire cadaver. And he goes, you know, Mr. Chandler is a finger on the trigger. You are not. You know, that's an interesting, point of view as well. Mm-hmm. I think just bringing it back to Fenton as well, two things I really like after, he obviously disregards the apple. You have Malcolm and Victor talking about going to the butcher, going to the slaughterhouse, going to the funeral home to get stuff, and Semembe comes through with a poor black cat, which is like click. So we obviously, owning a black cat, had to hide our cat from this visual upsetment.
Yes.
It was just like, oh, okay, he just did that because it didn't look like a dummy. It looked like there was a real cat, and then it was like,
it was well done.
Yeah, so our cat was traumatized for a while.
We are assured that no cats were harmed in making this episode.
Our podcat.
Yes, our poor podcat, Charlie.
But I thought, oh, okay, but it was just a nice, light-hearted, well, can I say that? I don't know, probably not. It was a nice, not nice even, it was just that shocking moment, I suppose, but it had a dark humor to it. I liked how Fenton as well felt like an insect crawling up the stairs behind Victor and Malcolm, just as they go to investigate the bumps and noises from Vanessa's bedroom, which was good.
Yeah, I think also as well, the appearance of the master in the bedroom was quite effective, because we hadn't seen the creature like that since episode 1, and you know, for all intents, we've seen not that many monsters around. So when you do see it in the room, like in their abode, it was quite effective.
Yeah, I love the design of the character. There's a character in The Lord of the Rings, the voice of Sauron, who has the similar style of look about him, where the lips are slit open, so it reveals more of the teeth than are humanly possible to reveal. So this moment, obviously, the vampiric characters, people that suck blood, teeth are massively important to those characters. So this design of him being able to pull back his lips almost 5 ways to expose his teeth is just such a terrifying design by the showrunners. So I really like it. So I'm excited to see more of him. But I do love that he has that moment as he's being approached by Sir Malcolm and by Victor, that he takes a quick glance at the crucifix on the wall as well. So a little illusion that maybe the crucifix is protecting people the way it's said to. So lovely touches in this episode, and I really do like the reveal that not all is as it seems. Yeah. And Vanessa is also being used by Sir Malcolm, who will do anything. He'll burn down the world if he gets his daughter back. So nice little points. Any other notes about this episode as we close out our discussion on episode 4?
The only one I have, and it's Fenton's final word, which is mother. As again, that kind of awful kind of idea or notion that you get in your head when you see him fall back towards the smashed mirror, and you just realize that the central bit of woodwork that's turned into a stake has just gone through the back of his head. But his final word is mother, and I like that reflection because he uses it in episode 3 as well. He suddenly sort of becomes distracted and starts talk as though he's talking with his mother, and I like the reflection of it, that as well it's almost like in the same way that he uses master. Obviously, very similarly kind of related, but, does he see his current master just jump through the window as a mother figure? Is it kind of that kind of idea? Or was his mother pure evil and more of a master? But it's just that last kind of idea and moment through his head is, in relation to his mother, and how does that connect, or does it even, with the master? I don't know, but I just kind of like that element to it.
Interesting, isn't it? Because the way I was seeing it was that potentially Master is the father figure in his life, and Vanessa possibly is the mother figure that he's striving to bring back for his master, almost the bride of Dracula, I guess.
I actually thought it a third different option there. I thought that similar to you, Derek, the master is the father figure. The mother is this other figure, because Fenton says, "Mother, why does everyone want her?" And I'm assuming they're referring to Vanessa. So this is like Mother Evil. I don't know what she, and it could be allusion towards, season 2 later on.
Maybe.
Yeah, but it was very interesting script.
Or it potentially could be an allusion to Amon-Ra and Amunet. The two joined as one.
Absolutely.
So maybe Master is Amon-Ra and Mother is Amun-Tet.
That's it.
Potentially.
The hidden ones, and they are hidden. So, yeah. One point I wanted to raise, I thought was really cool at the end, in that underground dogfight or whatever it is. I found the really cool parallel there between Flash Jack decimating the rats and Ethan.
Oh, yes.
And then Ethan being approached by those other gentlemen. And so you have these two fights happening in parallel. And again, a little tidbit there towards the dogs and, wolfish nature, and Ethan,
absolutely,
entering that fight as well. So yeah, I like the two.
Yeah, I did. And a primer for what's to come. It's got the adrenaline going,
Yeah, I do kind of wish that Ethan had taken out those, foppish.
I did as well.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, me too.
Like the dog took out the rats, because they are the rats of British society. That idea of, you're not even welcome here, America.
Yeah.
We do things the way we want to do them, and you don't even know what that is. And then they start beating on him and piling on him. I love the scene, and really, once again, the production and the editing of that scene, as you see what the fighting is doing to Ethan. And the only reason they're there is, once again, we find out from Dorian Gray, this is a thing he used to go to that excited him, and it doesn't excite him anymore, because once you get used to these things, nothing exciting about it, off I go again. So another disaffected youth in Dorian Gray. Quickly, just one quick note, because I didn't mention it last episode when we had the non-reveal of the painting of Dorian Gray. I'm a little disappointed that we don't see what Dorian Gray looks like at potentially 100 or 500 years old, whatever he is, because I think I want to see how disgusting looking and how the actual version of Dorian Gray will be on the painting, because he seems like he's gone through everything. He seems like he's already experienced everything in life, every debauched thing you can possibly imagine. So what would that painting actually look like if we saw the toll it was taking on his real body? I'm just really intrigued. So maybe it's enough to have it just being shown in the background, and the fact that Dorian's quite fascinated by it. But now it makes me want to have the camera just go around the other side and see that painting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely want to see it. Definitely.
Let's leave it there for our discussion on episode 4 of Penny Dreadful. Overall, guys, what did you think of the first 4 episodes of this show? Ray, as our guest, do you want to kick us off?
Oh yeah, I just thought it's very strong, a very strong show. The first 4 episodes, it has you invested into the stories. There are a lot of things happening, but in no way do you get lost in the characters as who's who, because they're quite well defined. I mean, if they're not well-known literature characters, you do get to understand them quite quickly. Just again, the script writing, very, very poetic in nature. The set designs, everything is done just so well. And I think, John, you touched upon it before about, there's no holes barred with the violence or the language or anything like that. And that kind of always keeps you on edge, because it's a foreign time for us. We don't live that during that era. So anything can happen. Like, things are a bit more barbaric then, or a bit more primitive. It's a very strong series, a very good start to the season.
Excellent. John, overall, what's your thoughts?
Well, if I was to give it an out of 5, I would give it 5 Hannah's winks out of 5. I just think this is gorgeously shot, acted, and written. It's so rich in detail. It's unrelenting, and it's complex. There's no easy answer. There's no good versus evil, in that sense, even though it is at its heart good versus evil. And I think there are great supporting characters in this, that surround the wonderful central cast. I think Mr. Lyle, Fenton, and also, Vincent Brand as well, the theatre, owner, are just absolutely great around this central cast. And I think, Eva Green for me just shines as Vanessa Ives in her performance. The word I've used to describe it would be dangerous. To be honest, she's just this danger. She's this unknown sort of something going on in amongst this group. And I like the unlikely allies in a sense. Whether they're allies or not is another matter, but coming together, having their own affliction or curse, and how it treads this path between modernity and antiquity. This age of the Industrial Revolution, but we're looking back to Amun-Ra, Amunet, and to, these previous times with religion and superstition at the heart of it, yet we have this modernity of science, contrasting with that, this kind of idea of more certainty in the belief of humans to control their own destiny rather than ancient deities, I think is really interesting. So that line of science and superstition walking hand in hand, as Victor says, I think, is a really great point. And I love the fact of the reality, of these different shadow worlds, of the illegal dogfight, the opium den, the séance, and the lithographs, and how that is in itself, the underbelly of Victorian society. And then you have this deeper, darker, more vampiric kind of shadow world as well. So yeah, really, really good. Can't wait to do part 2, to be honest.
Excellent.
So go on, Derek. What are your thoughts on the first 4 episodes?
I really, really enjoyed this show. It's just a beautifully crafted series. One of the things that I find so interesting in Penny Dreadful is it's a love letter, as I mentioned a couple of times, to something that is not really done anymore. So they are asking a massive amount of their audience here. They're asking for their audience to be in love with something that was massively niche over the previous 100 years, from when they stopped being produced, from when they were replaced by horror movies and comic books. They're asking for their audience to be in love and know the characters that they may not know, One of the things I find very interesting is a lot of the characters that are introduced, from Victor Frankenstein to Van Helsing and Dorian Gray, even Mina Murray or Murray Harker, as we've spoken about a little bit in our previous podcasts. All of those characters are introduced as if you're supposed to know who they are. And then even if you do know who they are, the rug gets pulled out from under you because they're not who they were in the past. They're not the people that you may know from their original creation. So that's asking a massive amount of an audience. And it feels like this show is so confident in that conviction and so confident in putting this on screen for their audience and making them work out. It's kind of almost what benefits it as a show that was on every week, because you'd watch an episode and go, oh, I wonder who that character is. And then you'd look it up and you'd find out details behind it. And it leaves you to do that research. It leaves you to do it. And when you do that research, as I say, then the rug gets pulled out from under you, because it's not exactly the character you were thinking it was. Actually, this character is evil and they were good in the past. Actually, Mina's never going to be saved because she's a vampire. That's completely different from the damsel in distress that was in the original novels and the original movies, So I really like what it's done in the show and how it flips everything on its head, and gives you those entry points so that you can kind of piece things together, but always keeps you on the edge of your seat throughout all 4 of these episodes. So really, really enjoyable show. I'm really excited to get to part 2. But that's enough for us for part 1 of our discussion about Penny Dreadful. Thanks so much to Ray for joining us for this episode. Glad to have you on board, mate.
No worries. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Chatting this show with you guys has been a dream, so I've really been enjoying it.
Excellent. You can hear more of Ray over on Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast, and on Last Sons of Krypton, Superman podcast.
Yeah, that's right. I should include that as well. Yeah, so obviously doing the Into the Night podcast, the Moon Knight podcast, sorry. at ITK Moon Knight, but also do a podcast, Last Sons of Krypton, lskpodcast.libsyn.com. And LSK Podcast is our handle on Twitter. And you can just search that in Facebook as well. Everything to do with Superman. My co-host Connor is an avid fan. I am a newbie, although I am quickly learning. So it's a journey for me.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And he's been revealing a lot of stuff that you may not have known about Superman, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of tearing down a lot of, I guess, stereotypes of him. That, I always bring up the burning buildings. I know Connor will hate me about mentioning it. But yeah, anyway, give it a listen. Even if you are a fan of Superman or you want to know about the character more than the Christopher Reeve movie, check it out. But also check out Moon Knight as well. He's an awesome character, and he's coming to the TV screens very, very soon.
Excellent. Again, thanks so much for joining us, Ray. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, dear listeners, you can go over to tvpodcastindustries.com, click any of the subscribe buttons to any of our podcasts. We've covered many series over time. Right now we're covering Star Trek Picard at the moment. Really enjoying that, about halfway through that series. And as we mentioned before, we will in the future be covering Penny Dreadful City of Angels, which is released on April 24th, 2020. We'll be covering that on TV Podcast Industry. So make sure that you stay subscribed to this podcast, because you'll get all of our discussions about Penny Dreadful and all of our discussions about Star Trek Picard, all leading up to Penny Dreadful City of Angels.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Great to have you on, Ray. As always, it's a pleasure, chatting with you, for sure. It's great to have, the third voice. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you want to get these episodes early, as I mentioned earlier on, you can support us over on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. Any amount of donation there gets these episodes early, but another way to show a bit of love for the podcast, make sure you share the episodes on any of your social media channels.
Yeah, well, I think that wraps everything up, guys. So we'll be back for part 2. As always, fellow Penny faithful, we will be back soon. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Just remember, keep watching, keep listening, and importantly, keep screaming.
Catch up.
Bye.
Bye.